morning, everyone. We'll call the special call meeting of the Jackson City Council, May 21st, 2013 to order. And I'll lead us in invocation and pledge. If you would, please rise. Father, we come before you this morning just thanking you for this day, thanking you for the life that you, breath of life that you've given us this morning.
Yes.
Father, we're here to proclaim you as our Lord, our God, and our King, and to acknowledge your divine sovereignty in our life. Father, we thank you for the many ways that you've blessed our city. Father, I thank you for this council. The word says that they were ordained by you to be here and to function in human government. Father, that is indeed a high calling, and we thank you for them. Father, we want to lift up especially people in Moore, Oklahoma. This morning, Father, that has seen such devastation. Father, we'll confess to you that many of our people understand that horror and that terror that swept through that city. So we just asked your arms of comfort around them, Father. Just strengthen them. And again, Father, that you're a sovereign God. Again, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the ways that you've blessed us, Father, and we just pray that everything we say, everything we do will bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think you can show that all council members are present. And this time it's indicate the invitation for public comment on any item under new business and also on the ordinances on first reading. And before we get to the first item, let me just commend all of our department heads and our people for the hard work that they've put in on this budget for probably about the past 3 months. They've made a number of trips to City Hall. You have Al, Karen, Sam, all the people here, especially all the department heads that worked very well with us in putting together, which I feel like is a very realistic budget based on potential expenditures and based on projected revenues. So they've done a good job, and I want council to know that. Item 5, new business, consideration of the adoption of resolutions authorizing the incurrence of indebtedness in the amount of not to exceed $15,300,000 to provide funding for certain public works projects and to fund the incidental and necessary expenses related thereto. Council may wonder why this is one of the first items on the agenda, but we are talking about approving our operating and capital budget, and before we approve a budget, we have to have the money to spend, so that's why that particular item is first on the agenda. Al?
Okay. Tommy Green, I think, who most of you have met at least about 2 years ago when we took a $10 million loan out with through Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. So he's going to really tell you the details of the mechanics, because this time we're looking at a variable rate loan which has to do with the SIFMA index and some things that I certainly can't explain. But I wanted to just basically tell you what we're looking at here. The first resolution is what's called the initial resolution, and we'll get into this, but it just would be the authorization to borrow $15.3 million. It doesn't go into the specifics. The second resolution is called the loan agreement, and it will go into more of the details, and this will be in where Tommy's involvement comes into play. My purpose here initially is to, and I know you all have seen this, or if you haven't, let me know. But first off, we did sit down with Randy Wallace and Johnny Dodd. Johnny is our current treasurer, and Randy is past treasurer. And we did, a couple of weeks ago, go through this along with the whole budget. This 15.3 million that we're asking for, see if I can zoom in a little. For some reason, the lighting is not working on there today. And you will be able to question more in detail. For example, when Scott Chandler comes up, he can explain more how he is going to expend the $7 million over the next 2 years on road construction. But basically, of that, you can see almost 50% there is in road construction. Then we have 2-year for the departmental needs, and those are not all identified. Right now, I believe we only have in the current year's budget about $1,083,000. And then Sam, we added what for $250,000 for the helicopters. So we'll go into that, here we go, that detail a little later. Scott also will explain the need for the track hoe, and Chief Stewart will also get into the replacement of the fire trucks. These are some very old pieces of equipment. The CRA East Jackson, Stan Pilot can answer questions. Basically, it's just an anomaly with the CRA and the District 1 that we have. And then Royal Street improvements, Scott will also address. And Chief Kendrick can address the replacement of radios as they're needed, and signal tower parts. The park acquisition, I might have to defer to the mayor what we actually have going on there, but that basically, part of that involves a commitment that was made in the annexation area. Am I not correct, Mayor? Mm-hmm. And then we have police cars, which Chief Kendrick will address, and improvements at Dedrick and Highland that have to do with the lift. And the closing costs we had estimated there is about $120,000 on this loan, but I think, Tommy, it's more like 91,000. If you looked at this, if we had gone out to the bond market, open bond market, we would be looking at, like, Tommy, what, 3.3%, something like that?
Yes.
And closing costs that would be 1.5% to 2%. So you can see very much why we're looking at the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. Things have changed so dramatically over 2008, 2009, when we refunded our variable rate loans because we thought that was the proper thing to do, and maybe it was at the time. But the variable rates have gone down to, if we took out this loan today, Tommy, you correct me if I'm wrong, total cost would, right now, would be about 0.99.
99 basis points, less than 1%.
Less than 1%. And Tommy will give you the history of what the variable rate and the SIFMA index has done. What I would like to do, and we'll have plenty of times for questions on the detail here later, is just, I know everyone should be concerned, as they would be with their own finances, as to where we're coming from. This is FY08, when Mayor Gist first came to office, and we had an outstanding loan variance principal of $74 million roughly. And as you can see, it was made up of some variable rate loans there, 2003, 2004, and most everything was variable at that time. So we had started out with $74 million, and the point that I'm trying to make is where we've come from over these next years. We got that down to $66 million the next year. And then we made some changes in a way we financed. We did the refunding, so you can see, whoops, over on the far left-hand column, we refunded a total of $58.5 million, which was a combination of Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund variable rate, and other bonds we had outstanding. And we were at 72 million. So we went from 74 down to 66, back up to 71. Then we went to the next year, because we took out that $10 million fixed loan there, we went back up to 74. And here's where we will be at the end of this year. We will be at 66 million. And that's made basically, you can see that $58 million refunding is down to 49. The $6 million refunding is down to 4.6 million. And then the 10 million is still there because we had only paid interest on it. Now, if you'll bear with me here, if we borrow, mathematically, if we borrow 15 million, for the next 2 years, we'll have principal payments of roughly 4.9, so let's round that to 5. So we'll have a total principal paid of 10. We borrow 15, so that's a net of 5, and we'll be at 71 million. 66 plus 15 minus 10 will be at 71 million. When Mayor Gist came to office, we were at the 74 million. So we've done all these things with the roads, the new fire station, police cars each year, road surfacing that was dramatically needed. Now we've annexed and we've got even more roads. I guess Scott could tell us the number of miles we've picked up. So I think we ought to be proud of the fact that we've been able to service the city, and will have for Mayor Gist 8 years, without taking on additional debt on a net basis. Is there any questions on that? If not, let me just show you what we have on the table. And these rates, as Tommy can explain to you here, the 1.5 is a conservative rate. If we took out this loan today, it would be 0.99. And as you can see, we're not paying any principal the first couple of years. It's interest only. The good thing about our debt, when we went through our Standard & Poor's rating and got upgraded to AA minus, is our debt doesn't extend out that far. It basically goes out to about 2024, and now we're picking up new debt, which goes out further. But many municipalities would have debt that would go out 30 years or something of that magnitude. And as Tommy knows, that's where he has more trouble getting loans approved, because the banks are concerned about the longevity and what can happen over that time period. This is also it's kind of like a line of credit. We may not take out, we won't take out the full 15.3 million the first year. We may only take out a third of that. We draw down as needed. And Tommy can explain a little bit more on that principle. So it is sort of like a line of credit. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, it is. It's a draw basis loan. You don't, normally if you do a bond issue, you get the money. You know, if you do $15 million, you get $15 million. This variable rate that y'all have had tremendous success with over the years, you've saved over $1 million by using the variable rate before, and just on interest cost alone. This variable rate, you've got up to 3 years to spend the money. And for a project like this, where you're not buying one thing, where you've got several things involved, you're not gonna need all this money for 2 years. And you don't pay interest on it at all until you actually draw the money. So you're saving, in a sense, by not having to borrow the money, pay interest on it from day one. If you need $3 million of that the first year, you can only pay interest on $3 million. It's based on SIFMA, which is a Securities Investment and Financial Market Rate. Basically what that rate is the largest 5 banks that do variable rate in the United States, and it's their weekly average of what that rate is. the chart that you saw up there before was 151, but that is the 5-year average of what SIFMA has been, and that's including all costs. Today, as Al said, it would be 99 basis points. Because you have a good credit rating, normally the bank spread is 85 basis points, but we got that reduced down to 75 basis points. So you will be paying 75 basis points plus 15 for administration. You'll be paying 90 basis points on the money you have borrowed, plus the interest. Well, right now, the interest is 9 basis points. I mean, less than 0.1%. So that's what and now that can change. That can change with the market. But that's why we like to do a 5-year average, to show you what has been in the last 5 years. Now, a 10-year average is a little higher than that because that was before 2008 figured in it. Another good thing about the variable program is you can get out of it with 90 days anytime. If you decide that the market's gonna go up and you're thinking it's gonna go up, we can fix you into a fixed rate in 90 days. Or you can say, have another bond issue and do it within 90 days. So it's not something that you're gonna be, it's not like a homeowner's variable rate on your home mortgage. You can get out of this in 90 days at any time you want to. Now, Sam and Al and I discussed several different options, but since you do not have any variable debt at all, and you've had a good history with a variable rate, that's the years right there that are figured. And you look, when you go back before 2008, it's been 2.5, 3, even more than that sometimes. But now it's a 9 basis points. So you're actually going to be paying 1%, and you're not going to pay that until you draw the funds.
So I just have a quick question. So,
Okay.
so basically, the only downside of a variable rate is what you're explaining to us.
Yes, that it could increase. And the SIFMA is done weekly, and then the weekly rates are done monthly, calculated monthly as to when you'll be paying the rate of, as of right now, 99 basis points monthly on how much money you have used out of this note. It won't be based on the whole note, but it'll be based on what you have used out of it.
So effectively, there is no downside then.
Well, no, not really, no.
Well, the only downside is the world economic factors, and you can see up there, in 2008 is, what happened to our banking system and, the world banking situation.
Right.
But we gambled and tried to, and I think we did right. We tried to lock in a 3.3, something like that, because it was the world banking system was in shambles, and we didn't know which way it was going to go. In hindsight, if you look at this, we gave away several $100,000.
We did.
I just have to admit that, but I don't think any of us had a crystal ball
Nobody
All
knew.
right.
to say that. But you can see the last 5 years, it's, Tommy, go through the averages here.
Okay, yeah, the 1-year average is 16 basis points, the 3-year average is 20 basis points, the 4-year average is 24, and the 5-year average, which is what we used to figure your amortization schedule, is 61 basis points, and that's the 5-year average.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so make sure so I understand, if we went back to 1985 rates of 3.85%, was the actual rate for the city be approximately 4.85%?
Yes,
Okay, because
it
probably.
would be 90 basis points added to what the SIFMA rate is.
Okay,
See, the banks, as Al said, it's used to be a letter credit fee, now it's called a bank spread.
okay.
And the bank spread on a AA rated city is 85 basis points. But since y'all have good finances, it got cut to 75 basis points.
If we wanted to go with the fixed rate, approximately what would a fixed rate be?
I don't know, y'all was 3.2 something? It would be in the 3 range.
I think you said you did a small one for Arlington.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And that was 3 point.
3.2 2 or 3, something like that, yeah.
With the varying interest rates, what would be the flag for us to consider doing something different? You said that we had 90 days. What would be the flag that would cause us to start looking at that? What amount would we put as our?
Well, I think it would basically be, and Tommy, you correct me if I'm wrong, what the Fed does. You know, they said basically they're going to guarantee the current transfer rates. The last projection I heard was, you know, through 2016. So if they hold to that, their Federal Reserve policy, ain't nothing going to happen before then. But if they all of a sudden stop buying Treasury notes, stop putting money into the market, I think we'd even, Tommy and Bone Severs would come to us and say, hey, do
Yes.
you want to consider making a change? And believe me, I don't understand all those economics, but that's basically, you watch what happens to the 10-year Treasury note, which right now is yielding like 1.9. I remember when I came here and replaced Russ Truell, it was in the 3-point something. So, you know, you watch the 10-year Treasury notes and the Fed policy announcements.
Al, you said those numbers are conservative on the 5-year interest rates. If we were to stay below that average, it'd be possible to net less than the $5 million increase in our debt service. Is that right?
Well, no, we're talking principal when I say the increase in the debt service. The interest is not in that. When we started out, we said 74 million. That was principal.
Okay.
So that's what we're tracking. What it would do for us would, well, I put in conservative numbers. In other words, in the budget, I used the 1.5%. So for the first year's interest, having trouble reading that, but it's 198,942. We're probably not going to have half of that amount because, number one, we're not going to draw out the full amount. It's like a line of credit. And number two, that 1.5 is going to be
99.
0.99.
And that's based on the drawing the full 15 million at the time of the closing, which you're not going to do that. I mean, I can't imagine you doing that.
I
So
don't think-
it'll be spread
no,
out.
I don't think Mayor Gist is going to allow that. You know, there obviously, and I'm being honest, and Tommy would be honest, there are risks when you have variable rate if, let's say, 80 or 90% of your whole portfolio was variable. But we'll only have, let's see, this will be 15 out of 80, whatever that comes out to as a percent. You know, it's very small percent.
Yes, and this is done based on your debt policy. Everything in it is based on your debt policy. It's based on the state recommendation for debt policies, and you won't have over 20%, 25 maybe, of variable rate if you did this. Where at one time you had 100% of variable rate. We've got cities in the state that have got 100% debt, 100% variable. The comptroller wouldn't recommend that, but he wouldn't. You're not going to have enough that it should make any effect on it.
And again, we'll go through the projects later, but there's really nothing on there, I don't think, that would be very controversial. We need police cars, we need fire trucks, we need road repair. Stan can explain a little bit more to you about the 400,000 for District 2 CRA. But I can't think of anything else on there that's really controversial.
I have a question. I don't, just for clarification, you know, I believe you said that when Mayor Gist came into office, we owed 74
74.
million, but now we would owe 71.
When he leaves
Okay,
office.
so even though that seems like a small amount, 3 million, but we know we've had to deal with tornadoes and damage, and we've
Absolutely.
greatly improved the city. So, but I want to make sure that was right.
That's
It was
right,
3
yeah.
million.
Are there any other questions before we, Mayor, call for the vote on the initial resolution, which basically, Tommy, you might explain this more, but it basically authorizes the incurrence, as it reads up there, of indebtedness, the 15.3. And it's done through the Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund. And just explain
Well,
briefly
we've done
what
this, the last time we did it through the Public Building Authority. We do most all of our loans through the Public Building Authority, at Clarksville. But the only reason we do that is just because other cities don't have a Public Building Authority. Jackson could have one if you wanted one. It would just be an expense. And we do our stuff through the Clarksville Public Building Authority, and it's no fee for it, no charge for it. But they actually issue the bond, and the bank that gives us the best rate buys the bond from the Public Building Authority. And we've got close to $3 billion that we administer that goes through the Clarksville Public Building Authority.
And you do basically, I use the term bid out, you negotiate with
Yes.
3 or 4 banks.
Well, we negotiate with, we send a packet out to probably 7 or 8 banks. Some banks are more interested in smaller loans, some are interested in larger ones, and we get the best that we can get for the city, and then we actually bid it in a sense to where you get the best rate you can get.
Mayor? I make a motion for approval of the initial resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion from council. Council, please vote.
And the motion passes with 8 members in favor and 1 voting no.
And the second resolution is a follow-up to the first, and it basically authorizes a loan pursuant to the loan agreement between the 2 parties involved there. It's just a follow-on to the initial resolution, and embedded, there's about 3 or 4 pages. It has what the projects are, as we've discussed, and it's more of a legal type, because it talks about arbitration, reimbursement provisions.
This is actually the loan agreement. This authorizes the loan agreement to be finalized.
And that's pretty boilerplate, isn't it?
Sir?
That's pretty boilerplate, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Pretty standard.
Absolutely.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion for the resolution authorizing the loan agreement, and we have a second?
Second.
Okay, second. Any discussion from council? Council, please vote.
And the vote is unanimous.
I guess, Tommy, if there's no further questions, we will proceed.
Well, I know we've
Yes.
already voted on it, but I do have a question on there. In there, on this resolution we just approved, they're near the bottom of the first page, it's talking about $300 million. What's that referring to?
The $300 million.
I don't have that.
Oh, that's right here, Tommy. That's basically what your loan program, $300 million entails, right?
It's not to exceed that 300.
Yes.
Is that the prior, yeah, what is it? Is that where we redid bond issues? Because it's referring back to December 14, 2010.
This really, this would probably be your max.
That's what it says on page 1.
Okay.
Principal amount not to exceed 300.
That would probably be the max that you would be looking at. You're not gonna do that either.
That'd be the max we're eligible to borrow, and then we'll only borrow the 15.3.
Okay, I don't think we'll
see,
approach
we're
that.
on-
So
You
Mayor,
wanna
I
handle
take
the-
it both
Now, the
resolutions?
management summary, is there anything else we need to do on that?
Not unless
No,
anyone has
no, I
some-
mean, all we need to do now is, publish the initial resolution, then there'll be a 20-day protest period after that.
Okay.
And, then we'll get approval from the state, we'll do that, and then we can start the, preparation of the loan agreement.
Okay.
I think didn't we somebody discussed that y'all were interested in the money by the middle of July?
Some money, a small
Yeah,
amount.
yeah.
For road construction,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Well, I don't see any reason for that not to happen. Of course, it'll be 20 days before we can do anything.
Right, I
Yeah,
understand.
the next step, Mayor, is mine to do a public notice, and I think that
Right.
allows for, is it 10 or 20 days?
20 days.
20 days for anyone who wants to get X number, I forget the number or percentage of petitions, signatures, and come back to us,
Okay,
signatures against.
right. Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. And Al, I guess we're on the management summary.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
So we are switching gears, Mayor, unless
Yeah.
there's anything else. But basically now, I had put together a little agenda here as far as, and I'm probably going to go through this pretty fast, but believe me, at any point in time, stop and ask questions, because the real meat of it is when you talk to the individual departments. But now this year, let me just throw up the first page of the ordinance. And I'm not saying that you should hold back questions, but I'm saying we have a good story to tell here. Let me see if I can get this down to where we can see it. We have a revenue budget of $64,143,000, which is only up 0.75 from the previous year. And we have an expense budget of $63,359,000, that's only up 0.28. So just roughly there, we have a $700,000 positive variance. So we have a good story to tell, not saying that, and we want to open it up. We've already talked to Randy and to Johnny Dodd. There can be suggestions made what to do with that $700,000. We had last year, I think we started out with a $400,000 positive variance that dissipated over time as uses came up that were necessitated by conditions beyond our control. But we do start out with a very positive outlook.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. LaFoon, that's great. We have that surplus, but as you stated, some things could come up.
But we're,
As they normally do.
as they normally do, but I'd much rather be sitting here with the 700,000 plus than,
Oh, yeah.
than showing 700,000 coming out of our fund balance.
Yeah,
you know.
but I'm alluding to the
Rated
fact
A
that
fund.
we don't want to designate it for this and designate it for that when some emergency situations may come up.
I agree, very much so.
I think long-term, the city will have to, and start with this council or next council or whatever, have a designated method of funding capital long-term. If we establish the vision for a city, then we've got to be able to pay for it. And right now, and have for the past 10, 12, 14 years, had to extend our money that we borrowed in order to do our capital. Now, we've done pretty good paying it back, but if we had a designated source, so that's one thing that we're continuing to look at every day and try to come up with a reasonable way to do that.
Just to give you a little history of four years, I could have gone back further, but basically where our fund balance has come from. In FY '09, we had a $19.1 million general fund balance. That's the total fund balance, and some of that is committed. In 2010, we had a very good year with a 3.7 pickup of revenue over expense, up to 25.8. And that was a year when our health costs started declining. We were even putting money in a reserve at the mayor's request. Things have started to change in our health costs as our workforce grows older, and we've had some major expenses involving heart replacements and cancer and et cetera. The next year was still positive at 1.3, and then in 2012, you remember Mike Hewitt went through with you the basic reason why our fund balance decreased, and again, healthcare was the primary problem in that year. Now, Sam, refresh my memory, is Lambeth in the 2012? So it's really Lambeth, the $2 million that was out of pocket right off the bottom line, plus increased health expense that caused us to come down. Still at a very healthy rate if you look at the percent of fund balance to our total budget. So we have, let's say, $23 million in fund balance, and we have a $64 million budget. So that, as Standard & Poor's looks at that as a very good ratio, whereas if we had, let's say, $14 or $15 million fund balance, and Ms. Bell can tell you she would be very nervous with that, with a budget in $64 or $65 million range. So that's where we have come from. It's, again, a good story. Lambeth and health costs are the main factors. Let me show you where we're at right now in this current year. And I'm plagiarizing here. This is Mr. Dawson's analysis, so you may want to direct some questions towards him. But through April the 30th, when you take out the grant revenue and the grant expense, revenue over expense, if we were to close the books on April 30th, if we had, we would have been over 1.792 million revenue over expense. But as you can imagine what happens, you know, we're kind of like a retail store where we have 3 to 4 or 5 months of extremely good revenue as the taxes are collected. And that's starting out basically in October, and then you get a lot of late payments in January, February, and even March. So now we basically have some periods of time when the expenses are going to run $4 million, roughly, Sam, and revenues are going to run $3 million until we get our accruals. Our revenues are basically 2 months behind on sales tax and recovery of taxes from the state. In my estimation, we will still come out break even or above, but there are a lot of factors that can happen between May, June, and Karen accrues expenses and revenues up through August the 15th. Revenues and expenses that relate to prior periods, not just anything. So there's where we are right now, $1.8 million, but it will go down for the next couple of months, and then as ATA comes in and does the final accruals, in my estimation, we will break even or above.
Al, on that statement, last year, did we budget anything to come out of fund balance to include in that break even? We didn't last year?
No.
Okay.
No, we're trying to, now last year we did use money out of fund balance for capital. We had about, we budgeted about 1.6. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why we're going out and borrowing money, Randy, is because if we keep using money out of as Harvey would say, the rainy day fund, there will be no rainy day fund. To give you an idea again of where we're at on each tax dollar that's collected. And if you remember, Frank Newdecker, myself, Randy, others worked on a debt policy that basically said we can't let this shaded portion get above 24%. That's when we run into problems. So we're pretty constant as far as what we've got going. The white section is what goes to the general fund. And it decreases, obviously, as we have more debt to pay. And the last 3 years, it's been pretty constant at 19.3, 20%, 20.9. Our debt service policy, which we turned into the state comptroller, Justin Wilson, basically said we will not go over the 24% mark, and we would be taking action really and realistic far before we got to that point. So you can see that our tax revenues basically and taxes in lieu of, and that's basically from Jackson Energy Authority and others, went from 33.7 to 34.8, about $1.1 million. And that's partially what is enabling us to come out in a positive mode, is the growth of our tax base. Now, part of that is due to the annexation, and there's a multitude of expenses as far as road construction, road repair, new fire department, et cetera. When you really look at the annexation, Stan and I did this initially, we had to really put a pencil to it to come with a 10-year recovery. So it's going to be more like 10 to 12 years before we actually recover and break even on the expenditures versus the increased revenues, because we didn't annex any retail or commercial, basically. It was all residential. Just one or two more charts here. This just basically goes into a little more detail of what the 2012 taxes were, 29 million, what 2013, what the appraised value, now that's the appraised value, is 5 billion. And then when you get down to, retail, commercial is a 40% factor, residential is a 25% factor. So you come down to $1,554,000,000 of assessed value, and the taxes due was actually an increase of $1,416,000. But we really don't have the last item on there, line item, is public utilities. So we had to use the previous year's number because we don't get that information from the state until long about January. But that's for basically transportation and communication companies that utilize infrastructure in our area. Bell South would be probably the #1 payee in that group there, and it doesn't fluctuate very much year to year. And the one last statement before we get into the details here, or well, there's two more. This is where we're basically at on our indebtedness. Again, it's hard to get all of this on one page, but that's the $58 million that we refunded. We're down to 49. The $6 million that we refunded in 2009, we're down to 4.6. Still have 1 year to go on a bond issue from 2003, and there's the $10 million, which we first start paying principal on next year. So there's the $66 million that I referenced previously. And you can see year by year, if we wouldn't borrow anymore, that would dissipate around 24, 25. Around in there, we'd be down to zero, and that's not going to happen. This administration is going to have to borrow funds to the next administration because we don't have anything built up, a rainy day fund for our capital. The following, I just want to note here, that excludes the CRA's note to the hospital for $650,000. It excludes where we have guaranteed the HUD loan, but those monies really are, unless something changes at the federal level, the HUD through the Jackson Housing Authority actually pays off that in and of itself, and it does not include the Sportsplex debt. One interesting factor, and I know this is not on the table, but in case anyone in this administration or in the following administrations would want to know, if you add 1 cent, 1 penny to the tax rate, which is $1.97, you pick up, if everybody paid their taxes, $155,387. So in hindsight, if we had 5 years ago, let's say, added a penny each year, which would not be felt that much by individual taxpayers, you know, you could see 5 times, you know, we'd have up to $800,000 that we could have put away and not have to have borrowed. But that's for information only. I'm not suggesting a tax rate increase. The last thing that I wanted to look at was one of the main guidelines that Mayor Gist and his staff look at, but Mayor Gist is always waiting for these numbers, and that's our sales tax, because that basically is a guideline for what's happening in the local economy. And if you come down to come all the way down to a real good year, 2010-11 versus 2009-10, we had a 4.9% increase. And as you can see, even though we collect $42 million, we only end up with 11.8 or 12 because about 75 cents on the dollar goes to the schools. So everybody needs to understand that even though the schools are governed by Madison County, we are the primary source of revenue for the schools. But that 4.9% at that time, we were ahead of the state for whatever reasons. Last year, we were at a 1.6%, which is still, in the terms of the world economy and the local U.S. economy, was very good. But we started falling behind the state. And as you can see, right now, what I have projected here is a $12.2 million net versus last year a $12 million. So we pick up $200,000. And then I projected a growth rate, just reading what the state, what Justin Wilson's office puts out for the total state, a 2.5% increase that I put into this year's budget. But again, there's so many factors that affect the local economy. We see a lot of growth coming in out of the columns, but then again, we see other areas closing down on retail. The hospital has been a main source of funds with all their building. The contractors, the developers, all paying sales tax on materials. So it's really almost anybody's guess as to where we're going to end up in the ensuing years.
Al, I had a quick question. Could you repeat the statement or your train of thought before you said that you're not suggesting an increase in the tax rate? Do you remember what you were saying?
Well, what I was trying to say is I'm not sure that everybody, if on the street, or if they even ask you, if they say, well, what if we increase the tax rate, 5 cents? What would that bring in? Well, 5 times 155,000. That's just giving you that for information, because somewhere along the line, and it may be past my lifetime, but we may run into a situation where the expenses overshadow the revenues. Now, what we've done so far is reduce expenses by not replacing people, by only spending what needs to be spent. But that's not to say that, we have a couple of white elephants. We have the Oman Arena. Someday, we may have to replace an Oman Arena. And to do that, you'd either have to go out and borrow, Mayor, what would you say, 20-some million dollars at the minimum, more than that, or you'd have to raise taxes. So it's just for information. I don't want to be quoted in the Jackson Sun.
Well, you probably will be. So.
Yeah. And 101.5, so. Okay. That's where we're at. Now we want to get to, let me make sure here that, I do want to, for my friend Harvey, who's always after me about what makes up our funds.
I'm glad to know that we're friends.
That we're friends, yes.
Despite all of that, right?
Right. But the $22.9 million, of that, $18.2 million is unassigned, whereas we still have in self-insurance, we did have $1.8 million, did we not, Sam, before we had to take $700,000 last year out of the insurance fund that we had in medical insurance that we had increased over a number of years. But you can see now the Robinson Trust Fund has been folded into the total general fund balance, but it is somewhat limited, not by anything that's in the Robinson Trust Fund documentation. Sid Spraggins of Spraggins Barnett several years ago went through a detailed analysis because the YMCA and others got money from the Robinson Trust, and at first thought there were some limitations on it. There are none except what you, the council, place on it. So if you decided you wanted to use that towards a new park or some other type of capital, we couldn't use it just for operations, just to pay fire, police, etc. But we could use it for other capital projects, and that would be up to the council. So you can see we're at 22 million. The it doesn't show the titles on here, but the debt service fund, the 211, had 5 million. That reflects money that was still left over from the 10 or 11 million we borrowed, and then you have the other funds. So we end up with a total of $28 million in fund balance. And
Al, I can remember our fund balance being down to about $8-9 million years ago. You remember that? It was kind of shaky.
I'm sure Ms. Bell would have some comments on that as to, Karen, what, on a payroll basis, what do you always look at as to how many months of payroll you never want to get down below?
3 months, because with a disaster, you're gonna spend 3 months getting money, any payment from FEMA at least, for emergency funds.
The comfort level is really never a comfort level with respect to fund balances, because you never know what could happen.
Right.
12 to $15 million.
Yes. And we saw that yesterday in Moore, Oklahoma. I'm sure they don't have any type of provision to cover what they're going to have to replace in infrastructure. Just to give you an idea here, every month we receive information from the local finance department out of the comptroller's office, Justin Wilson. And what we usually look at is what sales tax is doing for the state. And the year-to-date growth rate for 8 months was a positive 1.77%. So state growth rate has curtailed, and we're just really running along about the same rate, a little bit under that. And when we, I know Mike Nichols at the county had people come in and examine the sales tax that we're getting here, and basically we don't have as much tourism as East Tennessee, so you could always expect the state overall rate to be somewhat above. Now, one thing that is good, the franchise and excise tax, which basically represents what business activity as far as new plants, production, retail, et cetera, that's coming in, the year-to-date growth rate was 9.12%. So I would imagine that the state legislature and others in the Nashville, two of the main rates they look at is the sales tax growth and the franchise and excise tax. Gasoline and motor fuel tax we depend upon quite heavily to support part of our street department budget, and you can see it's under collected by $15.2 million. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to get hurt that bad. We get a % of that based on our population. And part of the problem is, and Mayor Gist, you might add to this, in the last growth, when was that, about 2 or 3 years ago, ours did not increase, population growth did not increase as much as Nashville, Franklin, others. So our share of the pot, we didn't get a bad hit. We increased some, but not as much as some of the growth areas. Now, we'll just go straight to the ordinance that's before you, and that's when it's going to be up to you to call on people, ask questions, because the ordinance that we have, like I said, is a positive one. Only 0.75, less than 1% increase in revenues, which we would like to see more, but more importantly, only 0.28% in expenses. So it would be my suggestion that when you look through here and you see some departments with hardly any increase at all, purchasing, for example, I don't think you would want to examine much because there's no change. You would want to hit the areas where there are increases, which are shown as we go through here. So basically, unless there's any questions on revenue, I'll skip over that and head to administration, which is actually a negative growth, negative increase of 0.39, almost 4%. And very little, I can't see anything that I would want to question on there. It's legal expense does show a increase of 16.29%. But basically that's more of a hedge against what could happen as far as any kind of legal suits brought against us, etc. Then if we go down to general government, there we are looking at a 15% increase, and I'd be glad to have Ms. Bell or Sam explain, but basically, what we have done here, and we've explained this, I believe, before, we have put in, at the mayor's request, a 3% increase to all full-time and part-time, full-time employees, 3% plus a $600 bonus. So we haven't distributed that to the departments yet. Karen will do that after the budget is passed. But that's what the $1.3 million, or the 64%, reflects there. And that is the reason why we're coming up with an increase in general government.
Repeat that out.
We put in for all full-time employees, and I'm going to turn around and ask Lynn here. What about the part-time employees? What is the general statement?
Part-timers who have received second paychecks for the last
The last year. So they're almost full-time
Yes,
in
Yes.
effect. But they are part-time,
part-time, no benefits.
no benefits. But they are getting the 3% increase
As well.
as well. So that's really what makes that. Mayor,
You
has
said
it
plus-
been? Go ahead,
I'm sorry, then you said plus $600?
Plus a $600 bonus. And this is the first time, over what period, Mayor, that we've,
Been too long.
Yes.
almost 2
Been too
years,
long.
right?
If y'all recall last year, I think the state and the county received a pretty good across-the-board percentage increase, and we had a big goose egg on both sides, so we're committed to compensating our employees this year to the point where we can. And that, we don't know yet, I haven't really talked to staff about the bonus or the $600, whether that'll be the first pay period in July, then maybe come back and do the 3%, but whatever works well as far as putting all the numbers together where we can get it correctly is what we'll do, because all those numbers are in that budgetary figure.
Well, that's great. I commend the administration, commend the mayor on that. Thank you very much.
And if I could say, I just discussed with the mayor, that I hope that hopefully later on down in the future, we could kind of look at our part-time, full-time employees to even offer them some type of partial benefits, to see how we could do that. I think the hospital do that with some of their employees, the ones that work year-round, to kind of get them some partial benefits to kind of help them out also. I think it'd be a good incentive to kind of help them out also.
You brought that up in our little one-on-one sessions, so that would be something you'd have to take up with the council and the mayor and Lynn, and put forth in a resolution or a proposal later. The reason why we're down in transfers to other agencies is because we're not taking out of fund balance to support capital this year as we did in prior years. And the increase in other general government, quite frankly, and Randy, you've keyed on this several times, is basically in community promotions, which involves our ball club. Every time that we extend ourselves, and we hope that there is a return on investment here, and we invite the hospital, or JEA, or all county employees to go with us on the city nights, of which last year we had 3. We're basically talking about $25,000 to $28,000, and hopefully that returns itself in other areas. But you've asked about that and the marketing expense, and that's what the increase, I haven't been budgeting for that, and that's unrealistic. We should budget for it. We should budget for what we're committed to support the ball club. We do subsidize the ball club. There's no question about it. And what is probably more controversial is that we're subsidizing one entity, the ball club. With all of our other buildings, we subsidize every user. If we took the Jackson Symphony and gave them a rate of what it really would cost to use the Civic Center, they in no way could afford that. But we subsidize hundreds of users to all our public buildings, there's no question. What is controversial is in this case, there's one entity that we're subsidizing. Now, if there's no further questions there, if Chief Kendrick is here, I think we would want to look at the
Well,
police.
let me do this. If there's no objection from council, we have Tony Black's daughter is in the midst of trying to have a child this morning, and he has requested.
She has had it, but I wasn't there, and I need to
Get
see my
back.
grandbaby and see her.
Any objection from council in order to hear Tony Parks Recreation first so he can get with his daughter and his new grandchild?
Right.
Tony, come on up.
All right. And it seems like it's gonna be very brief.
Congratulations, Papa.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate the mayor and the council and allowing me to jump over the public safety people who yearly go first. And she had it at 7:45 after I got through talking with the mayor. And 7 pounds, 2 ounces, little girl named L'Oreal. Believe it or not, it's my 7th grandchild, so.
Page on the budget.
It's actually page 7 in the ordinance.
Again, good morning. As far as the departments, as Al has informed you, pretty much department stays the same, with the exception in my department of the park maintenance department. You will see probably a pretty substantial increase there, and the reason being, in all honesty, that department has been under budgeted for a period of time, and let me explain what that department entails. I have a total of 15 employees in that department, 1 part-time regular person and 1 office personnel. So actually, we have roughly 14 people out in the fields doing the maintenance. Not only in that department, they do all of the...
Just a minute, Mr. Black, we all flipping pages. We don't know where we're at.
Okay, the detail is on page 46. I think Mr. McLean was gonna stick with the ordinance, so.
Oh.
Right. And Karen, I usually rely on you for the page numbers on the detail, because I can't.
Page 46 is expenses.
Expenses.
As I stated, that department, believe it or not, with just 14 guys is responsible for all, even though it says park maintenance, they're responsible for all the public facilities within the city. All of the public buildings, fire stations, police stations, Sportsplex, Pringles Park, and not only are they responsible for the work there, but in that budget also is all of the utilities that are involved in our parks. Comes out of the park maintenance budget, and that has increased continuously, as well as the security within our department, which entails when we do events in our parks, we have a private contract with the security people. They open and lock our facilities for us. Also in that is whenever we build a new park or add, for example, Shirley Mercer Park, when we put lights in it, all of the light leasing payments come out of the park maintenance budget. So as you can see, interestingly enough, quite a bit was coming out of his budget, and he's been running pretty much in the red for several years. And so we felt that it was important to actually get it budgeted where it really operates in reality. So that's the increase there. That's the only major increase that I have in my department. And if you have questions for that or any of the other things, and in terms of the capital, as mentioned, the portion where we're looking at park development, as a part of our long-range goal, we have always had an interest, even prior to annexation, looking at an underserved area. And if you notice the demographics of the city, there's not a park west of the bypass. We don't have any type park facilities west of the bypass. And with the annexation, part of that was to look at doing something in that area, and we've identified some properties, and the next step is to see if the people are willing to sell a portion of it. And we're not talking about a gigantic park. We're talking roughly about 7 to 10 acres of a park. And a part of that process is looking at maybe a small walking trail, just a neighborhood park where it's not a lot of traffic in terms of imprinting neighborhoods. You're talking maybe a gazebo, a pavilion, playground equipment, something that's similar to Conger Park. So that's what we're looking at there. Along with that, we have committed to enhance Forest Hill Park. It's a park that had some, we've got a new playground equipment there. We put some new playground equipment in there about 3 years ago. But we had an old storage building, restroom building that we had to tear down. It had really began to look bad. So we're looking at doing some upgrading there with a pavilion, and we're going to have to look at some access because ADA rules require us to have people the ability to get there. So those are the things that we're looking at within that portion of that. So have any questions?
On the credit card fees, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well,
I noticed it's double there.
yeah, we do online registration now.
Okay.
All of our programs are people that have the ability to register online and pay via the credit card. And so that's the fee for that. And with the increase, when we initially started, it started out real small, and now everybody pretty much just about registers and pays online.
Okay.
Yeah.
And bottom line, Tony, even though you had some increases and decreases, you end up with 1.36%,
Yeah.
which is tremendous with the load that you bear in parks maintenance.
Yeah.
I can attest that the Sportsplex and Pringles Park, Robert Moore is on call. I have his cell phone number, and I probably take advantage of him, but parks maintenance keeps the city running.
Yeah, they do a great job. I mean, they really, truly do.
Any
Okay,
questions for
counsel,
the new
any
grandfather?
additional questions of Tony?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Congratulations, Tony.
Thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Tony, for the great job you do.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Tony, don't drive too fast.
Okay, I think we're ready now to get back on the agenda, and that would be public
Page
safety.
5 in the ordinance, and Karen, where would police department be in the binder? What page?
Page 16.
Okay. And Chief Kendrick,
Morning, Chief.
Morning, Mayor and Council. It's an honor to be here before you guys today to discuss the budget for the police department. Before we begin, I'd like to say something. I know the mayor addressed a number of specifics as he began the meeting this morning talking about the working with the department heads and so forth. We're very appreciative as far as the police department is concerned, for Al and Sam and Karen and Miss Susan White and many others, Rodney Todd, who are always in there helping us to look at ways and means to better ourselves, to be better stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. And I really commend the mayor, because early on in this year, he asked all the department heads to designate one individual within their agency to really stay fixated on our budgets and how we're doing and what we're doing with our monies. So again, I go back and say to be better stewards of it. Chief Michael does that job for our agency, does an exceptional job of it. He's with me here this morning, and we're glad again to be here to address any questions you guys might have concerning our police department budget. I think you would see, looking at our budget, we're looking at like 2.25% increase. So at this time, I'll defer to council for any particular questions that you might have in that regard.
Chief, good morning.
Good morning, Councilman Brooks.
Chief, you know my interest in the support of renewable energy and alternative fuel vehicles. Could you discuss where the department is going in that way and the conversations that we have had relative to the propane vehicles that the police department plans to purchase?
I'd be glad to. As you know, we're looking at 25 new vehicles in our fleet. We're also looking at the fact of alternative fuel sources, because as far as fuel is concerned and looking at gasoline as being our major fuel source, there's always a constant increase as far as gasoline is concerned. In fact, it's reflective of our budget this year as we look at that. So for a period of time, we've been doing a lot of research within the agency, and as I began to ask more and more about research, I found there was already a core group in Jackson that was actually looking at some alternative fuel sources. Councilman Brooks is very passionate about it and has been on this committee for a period of time, so I commend him for his progressive thoughts in that regard. Well, as we begin to look at it, and we looked at police agencies across the country, I guess our initial started with CNG, which is the compressed natural gas as far as a resource, and I understand our country has hundreds of years of compressed natural gas that will be available to us, but it's really kind of, I guess you might say, early in the stages of compressed natural gas becoming an alternative fuel source. So rather than look at the compressed natural gas, we decided to go ahead and look at propane. 3 of the new vehicles that are coming in, we're actually going to convert them to propane. We're excited about that. JEA has been tremendous as far as this whole idea is concerned, most specifically our mayor as far as the allowance for us to do so. JEA is going to provide us a tank and a pump at our Canalco Drive. It's not any cost to us. It'd only be the infrastructure required cost for us to actually set it up and make it operational. The propane is like, I want to say, $1.61 or $1.71 a propane gallon. So that's quite a difference in compared to gasoline. We're excited about Jackson, Tennessee, really making a statement in the state of Tennessee, because it's ongoing elsewhere in our country that alternative fuel sources are out there, and it would help us. You know, we talk about anything catastrophic as far as being able to be at least 48 to 72 hours resilient in our own communities. We're talking about sustainability for a longer period of time, and that, so I'm excited about it as far as, and we're not going to be, you'll hear others that'll come up talking about actually converting some of the vehicles in their own respective departments to propane. And in fact, we're looking at one now for our downtown units that actually do the parking tickets, and also our downtown officers. We're actually looking at a fully electric vehicle downtown to actually serve in that capacity. And in fact, with some of the electric vehicles, and Rodney Todd has been tremendous in this. It was exciting to find out, even though we were looking at it internally, that as we begin to look out within the community, there were so many others that were also likewise embracing this passion. So we're excited about putting Jackson on the map as far as being forward-thinking and progressive as far as alternative fuel sources concerned.
And Chief, the other 25 vehicles, the other vehicles in that 25, will they be able to be converted?
We're not, we hadn't made the plans to convert them immediately. We're looking at 3 vehicles. And of course, when we do this conversion, these vehicles don't actually come from the factory with that conversion. We have to convert them once we get the vehicle. But it still means that the vehicles will have the ability to not only burn propane, but they can burn gasoline likewise. Because as the infrastructure begins to grow across our state, we're going to find that be it propane or be it CNG, we'll have the ability to go to Nashville and places like that and actually fill up there if we need to and come back. In some regards, that infrastructure is not as strong as we would like for it to be. But yes, we're going to start with 3. We're looking at, in some regards, a return on investment as like maybe somewhere between 3 and 4 years. And so we think that, you know, in starting easy with it and just seeing where we go with it, you know, it'll prove to be meritorious to us as far as our tax dollars and better spending them.
And just one last question, relative to your budget last year, did you go over budget for gasoline?
Yes, we did.
And diesel? By
Yes, we
how
did.
much do you?
Chief, do you remember?
Look at it here. Last year? I don't remember about last year.
Well, you meant the current year.
The current year,
I mean, the
where
current
we
year,
presently
sorry.
are.
It should show you very,
On page 22, vehicle fleet, through April, they've already expended $511,257. They had a budget of $425,500.
Okay, so over 1,000 something.
Almost 100,000.
Okay.
Through April.
Through April, right. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Appreciate your work, Chief.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Chief, where has this been tested?
been 10
What other
weeks since we
cities?
found out that Dallas Police Department, back as early as 2004, had started converting their fleet over, and Lieutenant White, who actually has helped do a lot of the research as far as our agency is concerned, their agencies in North Carolina and elsewhere. And not only are they looking at police fleets that they're converting to, they're looking at their transit authorities and so many things within their own communities, because there's a very strong passion across our country to find this sustainability where we're not connected to other places as far as our ability to operate vehicles in our
Have
country.
they done all their cars?
For the most part, a lot of them, but like I said, it's really kind of I guess you might say, a good, strong, gradual learning curve for a lot. So far, everyone we've talked to have totally advocated what they've done and intend to go further.
Thank you.
What's the estimated savings to convert those 3 cars? I know it's hard to say on 3 cars compared to the entire
Yeah.
fleet. You have an estimated savings on per?
I don't have an estimated savings. The only thing we have is our return on investment. The investment to convert is about $24,000 to convert 3 cars. And so when we start looking at that, and what Rodney Todd has done is looked at the mileage on these vehicles, mileage as compared to what miles will be with propane versus gasoline. And Rodney with JEA came back to us with those estimates of that 3 to 4 year ROI.
And so what's the lifespan of a police car?
Excuse me,
What's the
lifespan of a police car, and I think we're seeing a lot, I think because of what council is doing, in other words, buying the larger number of cars, I think we're probably seeing like 4 years or more on our cars now. If council remember last year, we didn't look at any cars at all. As I look at our fleet now, probably somewhere around, about 42% of our fleet right now is running well over 100,000 miles. Some of these cars may run 3,000 to 5,000 miles a month because some of them may pull 3 shifts. Most all of them are pulling 2 shifts. But the more frequent we're actually going out there, and bringing in a larger quantity of cars, we're seeing that we get a lot longer extended life out of these vehicles. So in doing that, I think that's where we're going to see our return on our investment with the propane.
Thank you.
I think, in addition, I think the propane vehicles, the maintenance is less on those also. We should get a little bit of coverage.
It is.
there, too.
I know JEA has been running propane for a period of time, and they say when they go to change the oil, they look at it and go, why change? Because it just looks like it just came right out of the bottle initially. It's so clean, it burns so clean, and I think that's good for our green footprint for our community. I mean, global green lighting that our community is so excited about, that's ongoing in the Lambeth area with U of M and so forth. I heard a lot of good, strong comment from our community about that. So I think our community has a posture of embracing, we as a government, showing that we're committed to saving money and being better stewards of their tax dollars.
A couple of questions. On the revenue, police fines and forfeitures revenues, that's a decrease of $58,000. Is that mostly from doing away with RoboCop? Is that why
That you're probably going to see that reflective of the RoboCop, and also reflective of, I think there have been some, I'm not going to say issues, but trying to get the mechanics really squared away as far as transitioning from one red light vendor to another.
We dropped 2 red light,
That
2
would be-
intersections as well.
That would be the mobile radar unit.
I couldn't remember exactly what the on the photo and fingerprinting, the budget's gone up $41,000. What's the reason behind that?
Okay, what we're looking at on photo fingerprinting, and the reason the budget's up there, we came to the mayor and made this request to the mayor to hire a civilian to go in that position there. Mr. Bill Rohn who is our fingerprint examiner for the department, is not many, as far as we're looking at Mr. Bill's concerned, retirement's almost imminent for him. He's been with the agency quite a number of years. In order for us to do fingerprint examination, you have to have 2 people actually within the department, one to say, okay, this is a match, and another to confirm. So we're trying to retain or sustain that continuity within our photo fingerprint. Also in our photo fingerprint in years past, there had always been a sworn person that had been serving in there. What we're looking at now as far as photo fingerprint is concerned is actually just removing that sworn person from that position and putting them back out on the street where they, because they're commissioned officers, can be out there to facilitate arrest or do other things, and put a civilian person in there to get this done. And the mayor was very supportive of that.
And the other question is the increase in the school resource officer of $67,000.
That's because the school came to us and asked us to supply 2 more school resource officers. We had 4, now we're going to be supplying 6 school resource officers. one at JCM, one at the alternative school, one at Madison, one at Southside, one at Tigard, and one at North Parkway.
Just for the record, I'm opposed to the city paying county expenses, but nonetheless, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chief, where do we stand on the aviation unit?
Aviation unit, as you guys know, we get a lot of our equipment of that nature from the Department of Defense reutilization. In other words, things that the military is no longer using. We were able to find in Hawkins County that there were two underutilized, when I say two underutilized, really there was only one operational helicopter there that was underutilized by the sheriff of that particular county. We were able to facilitate getting that helicopter because of them not using it. And in conjunction with getting that, there was also a hull that came with it of another helicopter, which is what this is going to allow us to do, is to cannibalize that hull and replace the wiring system in the helicopter that we already had with our agency. So that's where we stand. We've actually got them back here. They're going through an assessment now as far as the mechanics, making sure they're airworthy. We'll be do painting and whatever else will be needed to get them in flight.
So will one be primary and the other one backup?
Yes, sir.
We've always had the backup. It just never was painted. It was still the military green, and it's flyable. It's just got to have a lot of maintenance done on it because it wasn't the primary.
Is it flying now?
No.
Okay.
The engine that came out of the one that went down, Rolls-Royce checked it out. It's in great condition, nothing wrong with the engine, and we're going to transfer the engine to that one and get it flyable as well.
Chief, can
One
you?
last question, just,
Go ahead.
I'm just curious about the telephones. We didn't put anything in the budget last year.
Excuse me,
For
ma'am?
telephones, it looks like we didn't put anything in the budget last year for telephones.
Is that for radios, isn't it?
Radios?
It says telephones,
It
but,
does.
yeah,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
But you made the radios.
There wasn't a line item
Yeah,
in there
that's
last year for
radios.
those repair, and Miss Bell put that in there
Yeah.
for us this year in order we might be able to track that.
Yeah, I was just confused by the telephone there. Okay, all right.
Chief, your fingerprint guy, is he on contract or he's part-time from lives in Memphis and comes back and forth and does
Right.
the current fingerprint?
Mr. Bill's 81 years old.
Okay, go, all right. Okay, any other questions for the chief or Deputy Chief Michael while they're here?
There is a decrease in the criminal investigation division.
Well, you're gonna see, you will see that there was an increase as far as admin is concerned. That was the movement of Lieutenant Melinda Wyatt. At one time, she was assigned to the Criminal Investigative Division, and when she moved over to another job assignment, it was in the previous budget year in which her salary was attached to the Criminal Investigative Division, so it moved it over to the administrative side.
Chief and Chief Michaels, with respect to the budget and budgetary requests, do you feel like we have all the tools necessary for crime fighting that we can kind of make a dent in the wall?
I'm gonna tell you, I'd always love to have a lot more tools out there, but I think our strongest tool that we have as far as crime fighting in this community is our people. And we've got
But in your budgetary, monetary.
budgetary
requests,
wise, sir, I think we're in good shape, and we're very diligent about looking at grants too that won't have to impact, our budget with the city, that we can facilitate doing some things with.
I know, and when you're training, in the addition of new police officers coming up, I know you have a lot of retirees. Two good friends of mine are leaving, have been with the police for a long time. Captain Truelove and Deputy Chief Campbell, well, you're losing a lot of experience there, and I hope that we're, in our training aspect, that we're having some people to come on up and move on board.
I think we do, Councilman Buchanan, and the reason I think I can say that without any reservations whatsoever is you look at the initiative of the people that are in the employees that we see with the Jackson Police Department, and I think a most recent article in the paper was very indicative of that, as we noticed that there are many individuals down there, even though they're pulling the 40-hour work week and they're married and they have other, job responsibilities and things of that nature, you still see so many of them out there looking for their Bachelor of Science degree and/or receiving their master's degree, as Chief Michael has done. Now, to tell you that succession planning is where we'd like to see it, no, it's not. We want to focus stronger on our succession planning, because I think we're going to constantly see that movement of personnel within the department, and I think it's just indicative of many ages, but yes, sir, I do feel that we have competent people that can step up to the task.
And also, what we implemented, that the council passed about 3 years ago with respect to mandatory, and Ms. Hennings can help me with this, mandatory 60 and
60 and 62.
30 years service. Is that coming into play?
It's coming into play in not only the 60 and 62, but the 25-55. 25-55 is they can get a bridge from Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, and there are people who are advocating once they get to that age of moving on to maybe another career.
It's a waste sometimes, though.
I concur, we always try to do exit interviews with our people because we feel like we can learn from those going out as to what we did wrong and what we can do better. But there are a lot of people now who are advocating that we do other interviews other than the exit interview. In other words, we actually talk to people that we see within our own circles and go, what makes you so successful in what you do, and learn from them before they leave, because as Councilman Cisco says, there's a depth of knowledge that's leaving our departments.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about, the gap in experience, and I'm just wondering, would we be ready? I don't know.
We're working hard as we can and identifying those areas where we feel like there's tangible things that we can put in place. But sometimes the old cliche was, experience is a dear school, a fool will learn in no other. And with that being the case, I think we've got people who have that type of personality and initiative that are going to step up, and then you've got that whole family of individuals down there who are going to jump in and help. So we'll be ready.
We're looking forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, any other questions from council as far as the public safety, police department?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Officer. Too early, come on. Okay, let's go. No, come on. Okay, we're gonna call about a 20-minute recess.
20 minutes?
15-minute recess. 15 minutes, it is now.
And 2-hour lunch.
10 minutes. Official business of the city. And I think, Al, we're ready to have the fire department up.
Fire department, yes.
And right now, we anticipate maybe going into recess about 1:45 or maybe 10 till 12, then returning about 1:15 for hopefully our final session this afternoon, if that meets council's approval.
As long as the
Okay.
food here.
Talking about food.
Councilman Dodd.
At the end of the council, as we go through the budget, wants to consider an amendment. If you'd be kind, just need to make a note of that on your own pad, and then prior to the final approval of the budget, then we'll take those amendments, and you can present those to council at that time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, guys, you're on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As Chief Kendrick said, I want to thank the mayor and his staff because they've really helped us helped me as far as the budget, as far as the new fire station. I want to thank Chief Dillingham for helping on the budget. He's been a great help. That being said, if y'all have some questions, I'm ready. Or I think I'm ready.
Administration, guys, I assume that's your additional firefighters,
Yes.
where we see 11.22% increase. That would be, I assume, your 15 firefighters?
16.
16? Would that be there or in operations?
That would be an operation.
Yeah.
Be in operations, okay. Very quickly, how about your administration?
That was an increase of the video conferencing, and what that's not the video conferencing, but we went into new software since we're getting away from the HTE, Mayor, Council, and we had to go into a new software, and the software linkage to the station is costing us a considerable amount of money per year, and it's about $40,000 extra we were not looking at, so we added that into the administrative section of the budget.
Okay, and how will that software and all that stuff help us?
It will save us a considerable amount of money in fuel. They won't have to be coming down there anymore.
Okay, so that's kind of the training aspect over getting the firefighters out, coming to one location for the training. Now you can do it by video conference or whatever.
Exactly. They stay in territory.
Okay. Okay. Any questions of Chief Stewart?
Just real
Deputy
quick.
Chief Dillingham?
Mayor,
Go ahead,
relative to the
Councilman.
questions that the mayor was asking, relative to fund, staffing, are all those new firefighters at the new station
Spread out
spread out?
because they're rookies.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Question, the new alarm registrations, have y'all seen any improvement in false alarms as of yet due to that?
No, sir.
No? Okay. I guess we're anticipating probably, because that program's just now started, that we may get an improvement there.
That's what I understand, Councilman, is that it's just now starting, the tracking's just now online, and we're just now beginning to see the numerical values of the numbers coming in for us.
Do y'all have any revenue, fire department have any revenue sources at all? You don't really do. I didn't see anything in the,
We do have revenue coming in as far as, and that's something that's not listed here, and Ms. Karen can contest, that we brought in something from our fire training brigades, training the fire training brigades at Procter & Gamble, right, something around about $40,000 last year. So.
But it goes to the general fund.
That goes to the general fund.
thank you.
I think while the chief is here, you'd probably want to address, council, the capital budget for the fire department, which is on page 3 of the capital section, which is in towards the back portion of your total budget book. But basically, he has $7,200 for electronic tablets, new turnout gear of $17,000, and then 2 new fire trucks of $700,000. And you may want to explain the age and why we're getting rid of these trucks we have.
The average age right now of our first line equipment is about 17 years old. Many of them are plus 20 years old. They're to the point where they're having a lot of maintenance problems. And when you have situations, emergency situations, you absolutely have to depend on your transportation. And bad if you don't make it to a scene, but then if you get to a scene and it breaks down, then you've really got problems. And just, these two will help tremendously.
When I'm going out to the new station,
You know, Quint's going out there,
we just have one truck out there.
truck and a tanker.
Chief, you all answer all EMS calls, do you not? You all send?
We go on a lot of them.
Okay.
Not all of them, but a lot.
So, but the ones you go on, is involved, like wrecks and, you know,
All
catastrophic
accidents.
stuff, fire, okay.
We got AEDs on the pumpers. We'll also respond if there's not an ambulance.
Okay, okay. Which would, I assume on a year-round basis, add a few more miles to your vehicles because of having to make those runs. And the two, in the Capitol, we got two vehicles, two new fire trucks, and those would be capable of carrying water and putting water on an active fire, both of them.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the difference between those trucks that are proposed and the Quint for a
Quints-
novice in firefighting?
Well, actually, the Quint can do that also, but it's got a articulating monitor that puts more water. It's like an aerial too. That's the biggest difference.
Okay, okay.
How many fire trucks do we currently have, and how are they allocated at the different stations?
Ma'am, we've got 18 frontline fire trucks, and how they're allocated is there's 2 fire engines and an aerial device at Station 1. We have a fire engine and an aerial device at Station 2. We have a fire engine and a reserve aerial device at Station 3. We have an aerial device and fire engine at Station 4. Station 5 has, come Saturday, it's going to have 2 fire engines, an aerial truck. Station 6 has 1 fire engine come Saturday. Station 7 will have a Quint aerial device and a tanker located at it. And we have 2 engines on reserve.
Okay, and these 2 new fire trucks again will go where?
We haven't decided.
Haven't
at this
decided.
time.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any other, any?
As far as the north annexed area, there are fire hydrants throughout that area already installed, are there not?
They're close.
Okay.
Real close.
Okay, so we're almost
Finish
completed
those
with that then?
Almost.
Yes, sir.
Did I understand you to say that the Station 6 will only have 1 vehicle out on Ashport?
It'll have a pumper and a brush truck.
You're answering those calls now, Chief, out northwest by the station, I don't know the numbers, Ashport, I guess being one, and Van Drive being the other.
Yes, sir.
Mainly those 2 stations are answering the, and we're supposed to go online out there when, supposedly, barring any more delays?
Next Tuesday?
Okay, next Tuesday.
Yes, sir.
And according to our annexation ordinance, Sam, you recall when we have to.
That was May 18th, that was 2 years from today.
Okay.
But we didn't make it a week, 10
Okay,
days really.
okay.
Because of the holdup with this thing being long.
Okay, we'll consider that close enough, just like in horseshoes. Okay, any other questions? Council, the fire department, chief or deputy chief? Okay, if not, thanks, guys.
Mayor, council, thank you, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, if we move on down the line, we look at Central Dispatch and Lananda, I believe I saw back there. You can address your questions there.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Central Dispatch, for the most part, is still on task with the same budget as last year.
23.
There is,
33.
I'm sorry. There is an increase. The increase one portion of it is due to the finally possibility of full-time staffing with Central Dispatch. And the other consideration is training allotment. According to the rules of the Department of Commerce and Insurance Emergency Communication Board for the state of Tennessee, for public safety dispatchers, you are regulated to have 40 hours of training within the 6 months of initial hire date of a public safety dispatching center. We do that 40-hour training in-house at our center here in Jackson because we have 2 instructors that are certified and that are approved through the state of Tennessee to do that instructing. However, every 2 years thereafter, the operators are required to have 8 hours of training. And that 8 hours of training can be anywhere that's offered any type of training. APCO Communications provides training. NECI provides training. Other law enforcement agencies throughout the state and the surrounding states provide training at 8 hours of training. So I incurred in this particular budget, this time due to the fact that we have never had a training budget in the past and can count for that since they were become their own entity, of $5,000 due to 13 operators that are going to be needing that 8 hours of certification within the next fiscal budget year. And would love to maintain that throughout the next fiscal year budgets as well.
How many do you have on staff, Lynn?
That's my question.
We'll end up with 24 with the last 2. And that includes the 1 part-time person that we have, which doesn't get to really work a whole lot for us because they work full-time for Madison County.
Okay, any questions for Lenanda about her budget?
About the capital outlay budget on your,
That's going to be for the radios. Is that
Capital-
753,000 that was allocated?
That's
700.
right off of the original loan amount,
That's $753,000 allocation.
$733,600.
Okay, 733. That was allocated for the north tower for any radio repairs and any radios that needed to be purchased for the police and fire department. Right now, with the 800 megahertz trunking system, and I'm not going to talk a great deal about it because we have talked about it, and you know as well as I do, Integrated Communications, our radio service center, anytime that there is an 800 megahertz trunking center, I think there was not Sarasota, but DeSoto County, Mississippi, was going to a new digital radio system, and they have an 800 trunking system right now. If there are any parts that can be purchased to save our hours, and to Band-Aid hours is the word that the Integrated uses, then they're going to purchase those upon permission from me, depending on the parts that we need. And that money was allocated in the budget for that, for additional repairs or anything that happens to the north tower.
okay, so the police radios, the fire department radios are actually charged through central dispatch? That was what was confusing me a little bit. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Have we gotten to the point where we can talk to each other? Are we there yet?
Just about.
We're just about there, okay? Good deal.
I don't want to say no and I don't want to say yes, but
understand.
it's a work in progress.
Okay.
And the repairs, the patches for the radios you're talking about, are we going to a new system soon?
Radio system? No, sir. I did ask for a request this year, and, from Integrated Communications as well as another agency, and they came back as 6.2 million. So I've not given up that hope. There's still some things that I'm working on as far as upgrading the radio system for the city. There are new vendors and people out there doing other things. I know the city is well aware that EMS and them are going to the Moto Turbo radio system, and that it's a fairly inexpensive system. However, we're talking about law enforcement and fire here, and we have to make sure that it follows the guidelines of the public safety. There are grants out there, so I've been told, that I'm going to investigate to find out for myself as far as allowing the purchases of a new radio system. But yes, before I leave, I would like to see the city. We're going to probably have to eventually. And of course, the radio system could quit again today with the storm like it is outside. But right now, it is functional and it is working. And we are lucky that we have already purchased some additional parts and they are on standby if something should happen due to Integrated and their engineers coming down and doing a survey now that they have incorporated with that agency out of Memphis, and they've come down and done a survey of our tower. So things have been purchased, and they are on standby if something should happen. And we can continue to do that.
Okay, any other questions about Central Dispatch? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, if we will continue on in the ordinance with page 7, we basically go into the old Public Works Department and start with Stan.
Why don't we do this, Al? Stan, the council take a look at those, and I know you all have reviewed them, and a lot of these will fall under engineering, street lighting, stormwater, this type thing. Planning is a kind of a standalone department. You all want to just look down the list and call people up as you feel like you have questions for, if any of the budgets may save us a little time and still hopefully
Capital
get your.
also, you said? Each department with capital and the regular operating?
Yeah, under Public Works, there's a number, and some of them have budgets less than last year. And you may have questions about that, but some of them a little bit over, so, I'll just let you all handle it however you want to. I thought it'd save us a little time if we just kind of look down those budgets, and if you do have any questions, I think most of the people are here that we can call up and. I think in planning, we ended up with the same budget as we ended up with last year. Reimbursement from planning is up. Stan, what, you got one position, or?
No, that's the money that you get from the state for planning.
Okay.
Transportation planning.
So that number has gone up, okay.
Do we have any raises in individual departments anyway?
Raises and any, well, obviously we have the bonus, we have the 3%. We always try to evaluate each year. We have people leaving, people retiring. Some will come out of existing position into a new position, and obviously we need to compensate them for the additional duties they're going to be doing. But that's all we anticipate this next year for people just who will be leaving and those who will be filling their positions.
Department of Transportation Planning's cut 50%, is that from the state funding?
I believe you're talking about the money that we got from that we've got for the bypass.
Okay.
And that's that as money is spent, that amount of money goes down, so.
That's on that code where it says TDOT transportation /plan. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Stan, I'm a little confused on the planning and the reimbursed planning being the two different categories there. Explain that to me a little bit.
Well, the what we call the PL funds, which is an annual allotment of funds that are reimbursed to us for hours that we spend on transportation planning. That is one of those, and that's the reimbursed that you see there. The other one was the earmark that we received back a few years ago that we've been using to study, do the environmental study and all that we've been doing with the bypass, and so that money is being spent, and that's what that line item is.
So the reimbursed planning expenditure line item or group of line items there, that's what y'all do that you expect to be reimbursed for from?
That is correct.
Is the county reimbursing you for that?
No,
or-
that's the state.
State, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's where hours and that we do on transportation planning, we bill them on a quarterly basis and they reimburse us. And the other is another account that we have set up for the earmark that we're spending on the bypass.
Now, we do the planning for the county also as a general rule.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Do we get reimbursed to the county for that at all?
There is a break, you'll see up there at MPO SPR, and the SPR is the rural side of the transportation planning. It's the part outside of our region in the city that we do the planning for transportation-wise, and it's a different account, and you see it up there on your list.
But my question is, do they reimburse us for that?
Well, I mean, we do that as a part of the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We do that planning for them, and we are reimbursed by the state.
Okay.
Now the planning services, just the normal planning services that we do for the county, they do pay us on an annual basis, $26,000 a year for doing that. But that's outside this. This is state reimbursed transportation planning.
Councilman Buchanan.
Thank you. Stan, why we got you up so you won't have to be bouncing back and forth. The handout that you gave us with respect to the Jackson Community Redevelopment Agency, the CRA, could you briefly go over that?
Okay.
Then I'm gonna yield back to the mayor. I'd like to see something done. I'm gonna make a suggestion.
All right. I gave you a handout that basically outlines the background of what we've done in the way of monies allotted to District 1, District 2. Now, when I say District 1, District 2, just for those that just refresh your memory, we had a redevelopment plan that was done, and we allotted certain geographic areas to separate districts, and those are redevelopment districts. And the first two that we've done actually redevelopment plans for is District 1, which would be basically the Lambeth area and the area west of Highland. There is some area that goes a little bit further to the east, but just for keeping things simple, just think of District 1 as being the Lambeth area for the most part, and District 2 being East Jackson. And those are the two areas that we've got redevelopment plans on and that we're doing redevelopment activities in. The city had a commitment of $2 million to District 2, basically the City Walk project. And moving forward, the city committed $2 million of infrastructure improvements to help spur that project along. And in funding that, the city went out and acquired a Section 108 loan that is paid back through the community block grant funds that we get, and they pay back the loan. We received a little over $3 million in that Section 108 loan. That money was divided between District 1 and District 2, about $1.5 million. It's a little bit more than that, but basically the difference between $2 million and what was received from the Section 108 was a balance about $400,000. So basically, what you're seeing in the capital budget now is just making it equitable between the two districts. There was to put the District 2 up to $2 million where District 1 already was. District 1's public improvement project is pretty much closed out. That project is complete. So that money is spent. $2 million for District 1 has been allotted and spent. District 2 still has basically the full amount that they had in their account. And this $400,000 that you're receiving, we would, unless there's a project that we needed the money to be used on, in other words, the local funds are not restricted like the federal funds are. The federal funds can only be used for certain purposes, and if we had a project come along that this money would fit and we needed the unrestricted funds, then we would go ahead and pull that down. But, you know, if we don't, we're not just going to pull it down and set it over that bank account. I mean, that, because you heard the experts talking today, we don't pay interest on that money until we pull it down. So what we'll do is, as long as we're able to find eligible activities and the federal fund works for that, we will spend the federal funds first and then only pull the $400,000 as we need it to make up the difference.
The plan for District 2, is it a concrete plan or is it still in negotiation?
Well, we have development contracts for projects that are in various stages. One is we have a development contract with the Mercer and Northern Group for a commercial development there on Whitehall, beside the office building where the state had, the Banner Hayden building, what we call the Green building that David Hunt now owns. The property that's just to the south of that, per se, is about 6 acres, and we've got a contract on that, and the Mercer and Northern Group are pursuing that in terms of a commercial development. Our agreement to them is we would provide the land as an incentive, and they would develop a strip center with lease space. They have a certain time frame to complete that. If they don't do it within that time frame, that contract ends, and we release, that project. We release that project, and then they release whatever incentive that we were going to provide. They're still in their time frame, still trying to gain some tenants before they will begin development. We have a development contract with Mr. Barkin for a tire center that was originally planned for the area between Phillips and Cartmel. It also had a convenience store with it. Since then, he's looking more at just the tire center now, and he's looking at moving that to within the area near David Hunt's office building. But to do that, we would have to pull an acre out of the agreement with the Northern Mercer Group, and they would have to agree to that, and we're still in negotiations on that. We have a development contract with Nancy Newman, who is the nurse practitioner with the Tucker Clinic, on putting a clinic on Chester Street. We have that contract. She hasn't moved forward on that because of all the changes with medical insurance and universal health coverage. She just doesn't know where that ball is going to finally fall, and so she's just kind of sitting back and looking and evaluating that before she puts out any capital outlay. If she, at some point that project doesn't seem to be fruitful, or we would release that development contract and then pursue something else. There was also a residential development that we looked at doing north of Roosevelt Parkway, but the problem with it is to use federal dollars, you spend $1, you bring the federal requirements that you spend it on housing that is only limited to 80% of median. In Madison County or Jackson, that's basically a family with with an income of $40,000 or less. The pool of applicants that would be credit worthy and could buy a house in that range is very limited. We were trying to get those values up because we already have quite a few houses represented in that area, and we're trying to build market rate houses to pull those housing values up. Well, the HUD wants us to do economic development, but then they hamstring us by not allowing us to build houses except for a certain income bracket. So we were not able to go forward with that project. We are actively pursuing other projects. There are some projects that the market's just generating, like the Family Dollar at the corner of Whitehall and Dr. Effie Wright. The market generated that. That went into the tax base, but we didn't have to spend any money for incentives on that, so that's a good thing. We have another entity that's looking to build something new. This would be a nice convenience store, a corporate-owned, something similar to a MAPCO that's been looking, that's trying to get into the Jackson market. If that comes, that would be market-generated, and we would not provide incentives there. So things are beginning to move. Redevelopment just takes a lot longer than development does, because developers choose where they want to invest their capital, and they choose where they are guaranteed that it's going to work for them, and that tends to be North Interstate, so that happens fairly quickly. When you're talking about incentivizing and bringing development to areas that you're trying to bring up, that takes a little bit more risk and a little bit more time, but we are seeing those things happen. So District 2's got things going. It's just there have been no projects that pulled the trigger on that we needed to spend some money to make that happen. There's
Hopefully working with your, if it's the proper name, Mr. Hunt, developer, and working with the African American Chamber, that we can go ahead and get something started. Because that money's been sitting there for about 2 to 3 years.
That's right.
It's been done.
We would like to see the money allocated to something. We would like to see it utilized. The only issue we've got now is the projects that we've got development contracts are moving forward. They're just not ready to pull the trigger.
Okay.
There's also an assisted living project that's involves some land across from Jackson State that's in the process right now. So these projects are kind of in the pipeline, but haven't reached a point where they're ready to move forward. Now, we could spend the money on public infrastructure now and do sidewalk improvements and do some street improvements, but the only problem with those, they do help, but they're not as easy to cut a ribbon on. They're not something where you can say this created jobs, this did this, this did that. They do help your environment and make your environment more conducive to development, but they're just not as I guess positive in the way of seeing development. So that's why we haven't done it. Now, could we do it? Yes, we could do that at any time, but we were trying to let some of these economic development projects kind of happen.
Hopefully we can see something within the next 6 months or so, and that the parties, the interested parties, the African American Chamber, CRA, District 2, and the board, everybody get together, come on one accord, and what we're gonna do with respect to retail developments, subdivisions, because I'm getting 3 or 4 stories. And it's kind of confusing me, because I like, Mayor say I move too fast, I like to see things move.
I can tell you, if you have specific questions, I can, in all those cases, I can tell you what the story is. The story is what it is, and again, I'm a little bit disappointed in some of the federal requirements that make it to where you can't use the money for what they want you to use the money for, and that's a problem because the East Jackson area needs market rate housing.
Right.
But we currently do not have a funding source that would not bring restrictions in such a way that make it not feasible. So if we can overcome that, I think we can get some projects started. As to the retail, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Prayerfully, Mr. Mayor, and to stand and through your CRA board that we can come to a final agreement and get some things moving.
All we need is someone to say, this is the direction, because we presented several directions. The redevelopment plan has several targeted areas. It's just, I think at this point, the ones that on our District 2 subcommittee, we've been trying to let some of these economic development projects play out because we would really like to see jobs. We'd really like to see, something that's going to spur income, and so we've been holding back on just releasing that money for public improvements. So we will know in this next year. We will know if these projects that we currently have development contracts on are going to do something. And to me, I'm of the opinion if after 2 years or so you're not making any progress, we need to cut your strings loose and let you go, and then we need to put those incentives out there for someone else, or we need to spend it on some improvements.
Stan, it may be too early, but since the creation of that district and the snail's pace that we've gone as far as redevelopment, would you place the restrictions of the federal funding to that as one of the top reasons, or would you put the lack of local private capital to that?
I think it's a combination of both, because the federal dollars, because of the restrictions, are not a real source of revenue, or resource for some of the projects that have come through the pipeline. But if you look at it in terms of comparable to District 1 and District 2, we haven't seen a lot of private capital, whereas the leverage effect we got on the one in District 2 in Jackson Walk has been, we put in, somewhere in the vicinity of $4 to $5 million, and there was about $40 million of private investment that went in that, and we just haven't seen that in the East Jackson side of things to that level. Now we have some that are wanting to do that, but you can also say that the two districts are different. The District 1 was a public improvement type project, and we could have done that in District 2 and spent the money, and it could have been closed out right now. But District 2 wanted a more economic development approach. That's always been the emphasis. So that takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more time. So you're right, Mayor. It's kind of a combination of all those factors, but we are seeing some progress. Anytime you get something that the market generates and you didn't have to incentivize, that's a good sign.
And Mr. Buchanan, on behalf of the board, we're working very carefully with the chamber. I mean, Ms. Nell and Dr. Boone attend every meeting. They very carefully make sure that we're trying to spend the money to make sure we meet the needs of the community. I mean, so they're very much involved in what the board and what the CRA is trying to do.
I have a question, if I
Yes.
may. Relative to the federal funds, aren't there so many jobs that have to be created in order to use those dollars?
There are, in some, if you're doing it for economic development, yes. And in fact, in our development contracts, when we go forward with people, that job requirement passes to them, and they have to provide that, or they have to reimburse, because the funds, if they're used for economic development, if you do not produce the jobs, the money has to be paid back. So that's a provision within the development contract. If it's housing, that's not, that's an eligible activity, but it doesn't carry a job requirement, but it carries that 80% of median, and that's where it's been difficult, because we've had people interested in building market rate housing, and people interested in buying it, but we just do not have a resource for that in terms of incentivizing that, because one federal dollar brings those requirements.
And don't we run the risk of the kind of development on, I believe it's Cartmel or Phillips, with the housing market there, where you have a $100,000 house next to Parkway East?
Well, that's, with the housing authority and some of the houses they built on Phillips and Cartmel, they had to incentivize those houses. Yeah, and that environment, has, does affect that. And it's kind of like chicken and egg. The commercial developments want to see rooftops and disposable incomes, and we can't get the rooftops without having some funding. So, those are that's the things we're up against. They're not where you can't overcome them. They just take a little bit of time to overcome. As I tell people, we're starting to see people take interest, and that's a good sign. And over time, they'll become more market driven and less incentivized. And when that happens, that's when you've been successful. Because if we have to prop it up, it's not sustainable.
And did I understand you to say that the Family Dollar is not a part of the CRA?
No. Well, we didn't have to incentivize that one. The market just generated that. We didn't have to provide the land. So that was a good sign. And I will say, in defense of the CRA and Johnny and Ms. Nail and some of those that are on that board and a part of that subcommittee, we're selective about our projects too. We've had some projects that have come down the line that wanted us to provide some resource, but they were not your top tier type project. They just didn't provide enough positive. And so when you're more selective about getting something that's going to stand the test of time, that you're not going to spend the money and then 2 years it be closed down, it takes you a little bit more time because you're more selective.
And to be clear, none of these funds would go to Mr. Hunt's projects.
No, when you've got your master developer, you have to keep your things pretty much arm's length. The only thing that he has is the land that's around the building that we provided as an incentive. That he does own that land, but we are buying it at an appraised value. So he's not getting some premium above that, and we can buy land from him just like we can anything else. But no, we're not. Other than the option, that money that we paid for that land, that's all that he's gotten out of that, and we have to be very careful because the master developer, he can't be the one producing projects and then being the receiver of all that too. To me, it's a little bit. It doesn't pass the smell test.
And that's very transparent.
We're in everything. We have to be.
All right.
In fact, our master developers will tell you sometimes it works to almost the transparency kind of works to their detriment in some aspects because you can't move as fluid as you could if you were just using total private funds.
And lastly, do do you think that this $400,000 will spur this process and get it? be able to get
I
it
think having that
moving
money
more quickly?
that's unrestricted,
Okay.
maybe with that, and if the groups that have been interested in housing, if they would come up with some private dollars, maybe the combination of both would be enough to get us over that hump. Up to this point, we haven't had the unrestricted funds. It's all been federal funds and bringing the requirements if we're going to make it work. Now we've got a little bit of money. That's why I'm saying we're not going to spend it before we need it. But if a project presents itself that we need the unrestricted funds to make it work, then we may call it down, pretty soon to get something going.
Thank you, Stan.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions of Stan?
I got
Go ahead.
question, I guess, on the unrestricted funds. I guess I got one concern. One concern is we spend so much money here, we need to spend the same amount of money there, and I don't think that's, good business sense. But, and my other concern is with the unrestricted funds, if we got the option to spend that money, but we could use the federal funds and jump through some more hoops, I hate to see us, not use that federal money that's available to us.
Well, again, on all projects that we consider, there is a leveraging effect. The unrestricted, let me just say, it's not totally unrestricted because it's capital. So it has to be spent on infrastructure, property acquisitions. It can't pay salaries to somebody. It can't do things like that. But if we utilize that money, it would not be to 100% level to make something to a project. We look at a leveraging effect, and we look at, okay, if we're going to put this amount of money, how much above that are we going to get in return? And we look at 5 to 1, 4 to 1 as minimums, and we try to get higher than that. So I don't know that you can look at it as so much that we're doing something that the federal funds wouldn't do. It's just the federal funds, at least in the housing aspect, you can't use it without bringing those restrictions. Now, federal funds for public infrastructure, I mean, if we were going to do that, if like Mr. Buchanan said, if District 2 decided tomorrow that we want to start a street improvement project here, those federal funds would be spent first, because they can be used for that, and there's no restrictions that would bar us from doing that, other than getting the project approved through HUD and making sure that it meets those requirements.
So I guess what you're saying is that $400,000, if we can use that to get a project started, and then that project's going to need infrastructure, sidewalks, whatnot, we can use federal funds to put that in, and use the other four.
To me, the $400,000, if we've got federal funds that can do the same thing, we're going to use the federal funds first. If the $400,000, because of it not bringing some federal requirement, and it brings a project to fruition that produces the right leveraging effect, then we'll use it.
Okay.
It just gives us another resource that will help us maybe bring some projects that we can't bring now.
Okay, any other questions from council?
The only other thing I would say, Mayor, is we do have a TIF for that district, and unfortunately, the tax base here is what, 2009? 8 or 9?
Yes.
And the tax valuations have actually declined. Whereas in the District 1, I just finished writing a $101,000 check because their tax value has gone up, but basically due to that medical office building.
Yeah, we've just seen, we're hoping that District 2's TIF will show some plus side, but it's a mathematical equation. I mean, you take your base, and if you have increases, that gives you some TIF funds. If we had TIF funds, that would be another source of revenue that we could use and wouldn't be restricted by some of the federal requirements. But right now, we're not seeing those positive sides, because if values are declining or you have demolitions, they take away from your pluses. So that's where we are.
Okay, council good? Okay, thank you, Stan.
Thank y'all.
We may be able to, we're about 5 or 6 minutes away. Tom, you want to come up and handle building and housing codes? And then we'll see where we are as far as time.
Good morning. The 2012-13 budget had 3 budgets: violent crime, building, and housing. The violent crime grant ends this year, but kept the 2 violent crime inspectors. I picked those up between the building and housing budget. So any increases that you see, I wasn't asking for an increase, just took from one line item or another line item and moved them around.
Okay, so through the grant, we've had, what, 2 inspectors?
Yes, sir.
Been paid by the grant for what, 3 years? Last 3 years?
It ended up 2.5 years because
Okay.
it was a late start on
Okay.
getting the grant started.
And we still need those inspectors
Have to
doing
keep 'em for
basically
1
what
year.
they were doing. And so we picked that cost up ourselves.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is that that movement from building to housing codes?
Beg your pardon?
The 57,000 from building over to housing codes? Is
Yes,
that-
sir.
Okay.
And then also within housing, I had to, on some of the line items, do a little subtracting to make up for difference also. Because we had to keep the next Lexus program. That's where we do research to find people. That's like $113 a month, I believe. And then I did an additional part of the program, another $25 a month. That way we can, if we can get a phone number, we can find a person, or if we can find a person, we can get a phone number. It helps maybe 60% of the time trying to find people, but that's better than what we have.
Okay, any questions of Tom on the building department or housing codes department? If not, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Council, we have 3 or 4 or 5 different divisions under the engineering, and that would be Scott. I would, and since we do have that many, and I know we have some infrastructure questions, Council, why don't we go ahead and consider a recess for lunch until 1:15, and then we'll pick right up with Mr. Chandler and those 4 or 5 divisions. Okay? Thank you. Consider recess. On the agenda, where I know Councilman Rom has a 2 o'clock appointment that he could not get out of, so he said he'd try to get back, and Councilwoman Vicky Foote, I think, will be in here shortly. So let's go ahead and get started. Scott?
All right, I think you are on page 38 and 39 is where my first account numbers begin. First is street lighting, and I think that it's pretty well the only budget up there that increased from last year, and that's just because of our normal street lighting budget as energy rates, as they increase, and the annexation area, as some of those lights come online through the year, that increases in that account is for those additional lights, additional energy costs. From there, stormwater, I have stormwater management, which is on page 39, and then pages 43 through 46 is your traffic sign department, traffic signalization, the engineering, and stormwater operations department.
Scott, if you would explain to him briefly just about stormwater management, what areas they're involved in.
Okay, yeah, we have 2, we have stormwater management, which is Wendy Ryan in my department. That particular budget is the management of the MS4 permit that we have with the state, and all the activities that are involved in satisfying that permit and the management of that permit, having a stormwater program, education type program, the rules and regulations that we apply through the city through either development regulations or anything that involves stormwater and erosion control. And then the 43-911 stormwater operations is the department that we took on about 2 years ago. That is really the construction side of actually working on pipes throughout the city, and working on the stormwater system itself. So that's the department that really gets the work done on our stormwater system. Now, I think y'all know that the traffic sign department handles all the traffic signs, along with management of the annual restriping that we do of all the city streets.
Scott, in the traffic sign department, you've got a reduction in salaries of almost 60,000.
I do.
Increase in professional services. Are y'all losing a person, or?
We've lost our, in two departments. In engineering, we lost Clarence Jones, who was our senior inspector, retired, and Wayne Ross is in our traffic sign division. He is retiring. And I did move some of the money that was within the budget into professional services. We're basically gonna do without both of those employees, but I moved that money into professional services, thinking that if we needed to have some consultant help because of the lack of an employee there, that we would have that allocated. Any other questions on operating?
We had the second chance program about 3 years through a federal grant, and I think somewhere in your budget did you itemize?
We have two second chance people that we hired as the full-time, part-time.
Right.
They're not receiving benefit,
Right.
and they are within our stormwater operations department.
So we hired them as graduates of that second chance
We
program?
did, and
Okay.
I can't tell you that both of them are really, really good employees.
Okay.
Hopefully get them on full-time.
Street lighting, is there anything in there for, perhaps maybe a test area and LEDs?
Of course, we've discussed that, and I've talked with Barry Michaels. I think we are gonna try to find a target area to work with JEA and pick a LED that's the most economical for the use, and go into an area and light it with LED lighting. Try to brighten the area up without increasing the energy cost with, 250, 500 watt lights. Try to get that output for an LED that's, runs less energy.
Have you started that process of narrowing down the areas, or are we just starting the process?
We started that. I've spoke with Barry briefly about that, and I told him eventually we need to really sit down and say we're gonna handle this number of streets and get that going, so.
And basically, his recommendation would be put together on the basis of how many calls for service PD had gotten in a
Right.
in a targeted location.
Make it a safety thing based on their data that they have.
Okay.
Could we use the hotspots that are already identified in the gang prevention task force, or would that be data that we would look at as well?
I guess we could. Some of those may be exceeded now by other areas of the city. So I think, through information, through PD, and where their most number of calls come from as far as service calls, we need to look seriously at those areas.
And I think it'll be an easy transition. We've met with JEA and basically said that we are going to start using LEDs. To how many and in what areas, we don't exactly know, but procuring an LED that we know that the city and JEA is both happy with, and having that really sitting on the shelf as one of our lights that the city installs is our first step of doing that. Once we've made that selection and they have those made bids out to purchase those, then it'll just be, okay, where do you want them? We're also doing the same thing for the swapping out of the yellow type light versus the white light. There's even though that's not an LED, it is a light that burns white, and it's a lot cleaner type light. And we're also having them go out and let's get that bids on for that particular light as well, so that we're basically can indicate each time what type of light we want them to put up.
Okay, any other questions for Scott on any of the areas that he manages?
He also can address capital too.
Okay.
That was a
Okay.
big number of $7 million.
Yeah.
Yes. You want to switch to capital?
Yeah, why don't we do that, Scott? Just kind of give an overview of basically what you see, at least for this next year, and obviously plans are to use about half of what
Right.
we have.
Right. Of course, the main number there is under the street resurfacing and slash projects, which there's two line items you see there. The general pavement management for the $6,800,000 dollar number there. That's your 2-year allocation, basically, like the mayor said, for the general resurfacing of the city streets. So we're going to try to split that up and spend about half this coming year, and then half the next. Some of the streets that we've been constantly working, identifying streets. I don't have a full list of, all the money that's allocated right now. But some of the streets we're looking at are our collector level streets, some of the ones that really need some attention. I made a list of portions of Ridgecrest Road, Old Hickory Boulevard, Middleton Street, University Parkway, section of Orwell Road. So we're really just making all the needs that we know available, getting a cost estimate for each one, and then from that, we'll take the money that's allotted and try to compose a project that covers the most ground. We also are going to try to set aside a portion of that to enter into some of the residential neighborhoods with our new sealers that we've put down. We have put down some of them on test project off Wallace Road. It's in Ernest's district. And I was very pleased with the initial look of the sealer. We're waiting to see how it performs, and we're going to constantly take pictures of that and kind of watch it to see how it holds up.
Provided that performs optimally, how would that work into the repaving cycle?
Well, I don't want to get carried away
Right.
putting too many sealers down, because those dollars will be combating dollars I could resurface with. But if it's a street that is structurally in good condition, it has a few spots that need repair, we can go in and patch those areas that need repair. A lot of times we get a negative impact from that because it looks like it's been chopped up. If we seal it, it turns it all one color, and then it protects it from further, sun deterioration and really weather deterioration, more so than traffic in residential neighborhoods. And we can do that for a fraction of the cost of paving. So it'll just be a constant balance as to what percentage we do with sealers, and as we learn how well they work, to see if it's balancing out and being a benefit to it.
Thank you.
Scott, are you ready to take requests, and I don't mean at this meeting, but take requests for residential streets that need sealing?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime, email's probably the best way, so I
Email
can
it
have
to
that record to pull back up. But yeah, any streets that you feel like are in need of paving or feel like maybe a candidate for sealing, if you turn them in for paving and they're in a residential area, I'm gonna already be looking at, well, is this in a good enough shape that we could possibly seal versus just say no to paving? So we're gonna kind of keep that all
I
in
think
mind.
most of ours would be sealing at this point,
Right.
probably.
And then the second line item is for Royal Street. This $495,000 is to really go from Lane Avenue, where the last project stopped, and try to get to Forest Avenue. It's still more of a rehabilitation project than a widening project. We plan to go in and mill the asphalt down where it's filled in all the gutters up to the top of the curb, do some curb replacement, and then hopefully be able to get at least a sidewalk path designated on one side or the other, and it may even swap sides because of the banks that come down. Instead of trying to get a lot of property and pull everything back, we think we can get down one side of the road or the other with a good sidewalk path. That's the scope of Rural Street. From there, and both of these, this is our local, all city local funding. The reason we broke up Chester Street Phase 2, Highland and Dedrick, and F.E. Wright improvements, all of those projects have federal dollars coming in through the state STP funds, and they have it's an 80-20 split on that, city versus the state funding. And so all of those are itemized so that we can keep up with those individual projects funding separately.
Mayor, on the, Scott, on the Highland Dedrick, is that the loop that we've been talking about?
Turn around.
Yes, that's the roundabout that's been.
Roundabout?
Yeah, that's correct.
Man,
Turn around.
That would be the roundabout,
all
correct?
right. And the traffic flow would still go down Highland? Explain that to me again. Roundabout.
Well, a roundabout is kind of foreign in this area, but it works very efficiently. We're trying to get an entryway into downtown to slow the traffic down. Of course, and eliminate really a traffic signal that's right there at Highland and Dedrick. And it will work like a roundabout works. Basically, the through traffic, there will be an island in the center, but it will be designed to accommodate trucks and all forms of traffic that's driving down Highland. They'll still be able to maneuver. All the traffic pulls to the right. If they want to turn left, then they will go right, go around the loop, and then proceed to the west if they're northbound on Highland.
Okay.
In the center of that turnaround, will there be something pretty in there, or is it just gonna be?
We're going to have a statue of the council.
Listen.
That's right.
Will it be sodded or anything?
Well,
Let's see.
there's a lot of possibilities, and that'll all be determined through the design stage. But yeah, you have the opportunity for landscaping.
Is that in your budget or somebody else's?
Well, at this point, what's in our budget right now is to begin the design process of that. We'll have to still do, even though it should be easy, still go through the environmental phase of it, which shouldn't have very many impacts. But it's really to go through the design phase of this.
So this amount is not going to complete the project?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
How much more do you think it would cost to complete it? A ballpark?
I think the overall project is around between $800 and $1 million. I think's the estimate for that.
Scott, do we have a starting date, or where are we at on these Chester projects? Are we still?
I just talked to Keith. He helps with all of the buying of the right of way. Of course, our consultant's doing most of that, and they're securing tracks for right of way. So once the right of way phase is done, we'll be moving to bid for construction. But I don't have a date. It should be, it should be where we could bid it in this construction season, at least to get started.
Design finished on that?
Yes.
It is, okay.
It's pretty well complete. They hold it, I think, open for any modifications for right-of-way purchasing and that kind of thing, but the plans are pretty well complete. And then the F.E. Wright improvements is also the design money to move that through to design. And that's got a construction estimate probably between 7 and 8 million. So that'll be a future phase for that.
Any other questions from council as to divisions within engineering?
We do have capital requests in the engineering, stormwater operation, traffic sign and traffic signalization departments, if y'all have any questions on those. That's on the following page of that, of the capital plan. The stormwater operations department does have the track hoe that was mentioned, large excavator that was mentioned earlier today. That's in that listing, the $200,000 for that machine.
Okay? Council, okay? Okay, thank you, Scott. Al, who we have next?
Just moving down the line, if anybody wants to ask questions of street department or city garage. Scott's already kind of skipped around and got traffic signalization and city engineering down at the bottom.
I think the first one up there we had is Public Services Complex, and I guess the only question there would be, Kathleen, that falls under you, does it not? You want to tell us about the 30.17% increase?
To begin with, there was a major mistake in our budget last year. It listed contractual services as $1,600, when in fact that should have been $16,000. So we made that adjustment in the line item. Also, we discovered that the elevator company was charging us a quarterly fee monthly, and so we were able to recoup $26,000 in that particular area
Last year.
Good for y'all.
Any other questions?
Where's your health and sanitation budget? Where is that?
It's on down. We can deal with that now.
We can
if you
go
want
through
to.
it right now.
Yeah, why don't we do that while you're
Okay.
up here, and I think the rest of them should go fairly well.
Now, that's
What
under
page are we
other
on?
funds. No page number here for that.
Page 9 on the ordinance, I don't know where you are. Page 21.
Page what?
21.
21 is law enforcement buildings.
Not a 21.
Okay.
Well, it goes from 20 to 69.
Oh, okay.
Not-
Okay.
Not a 21.
It's not in other funds. I go from page 20 to 69
69.
in other funds.
Okay. Does it start with Fund 131? It should come after Fund 125.
You might come here and walk us through this.
Thank you, sir. Next step.
It does, as Karen says, that the page numbers are a little bit confusing, but if you find 125, Community Development, which says page 69 on it, then it goes to page 70, and then it goes to page 21.
Okay.
Revenues and your expenses there.
Page 60.
Yeah.
21, I found 21.
You found 21?
After page 7.
Right where it should be.
Page 21 is basically, as Karen was saying, we've separated the revenues and expenses. Why don't you take us through the revenues there?
Any questions on the revenues? I will say, I need to address the fact that the expenses are less than the revenues, but that's primarily because the employee benefits amount, which was $410,825, was not put in, so that's why there's a difference of that amount.
Karen is keeping track of all the changes, and
That will be
up at the top, you can see her $382,000 for health and sanitation benefits, and then animal control, which you have also 23,000 right underneath that. So it looks like she's $400,000 to the good, but we've left that out.
But really,
that
we're
will be
not.
put in.
That will be put in.
But you might just tell them what your major concerns are in the health and sanitation department. I guess basically one of them that, I worked with Kathleen on this, and fuel charge.
Fuel surcharge
Fuel
is,
surcharge is going out. We're going at about $30,000 a month now.
exactly.
And that's really down. It has been much higher, and you can determine that by watching the pilot roadside.
I will say, we are going to be outfitting 2 of our new vehicles with CNG, for CNG. A pickup truck, a F-250 and an F-450 grain bed truck. Those are the trucks that you see following our claw trucks that have the red sides. Hopefully they'll be red. They are going to be CNG vehicles.
Kathleen, were you over budget for fuel last year as well?
Yes,
How much, do you know?
I don't recall, no. Our fuel surcharge varies from month to month.
They're not over at this point.
Okay.
But they're headed in that
Right.
direction.
Right, and I'm assuming all departments are, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast now, but.
When's the contract, how long is the contract with Waste Management?
2016 is when we renew the contract. We are going on a year-to-year
We're a
at this
year-to-year now?
point.
Okay.
Right.
And that comes around in August?
August, we renew, or not.
Are we even considering going to CNG vehicles or requiring them? or
That's a
asking them to-
possibility. That's
Okay.
one of the reasons was we were going to try this in some of our more visible vehicles that we purchased.
Okay.
The city of Louisville, their entire waste management fleet is on CNG at this point, and that we're going to experiment with it, see if it's a possibility when we rebid the contract.
But if waste management vehicles go to alternate fuel, doesn't necessarily mean that we will escape a fuel surcharge.
Exactly.
That's right.
With natural gas, whatever type of alternate fuel they use, because they're going to be protected depending on the rise or the fall of that particular fuel.
Right, that charge, that fuel surcharge changes every month.
Right, but the cutoff is $2.71.
$2.71. Once diesel goes to $2.71, then they start charging us for fuel.
Now, that's something we would need and obviously need to renegotiate in the
Exactly.
next contract. They've already spent $482,000 on fuel surcharge against a budget of $460,000, and that's why we upped it to $630,000, maybe too conservatively, but as you know, Randy, fuel right now is just bouncing all over the map. You would think it would actually be higher for the summer season, but it's down unexplainably.
How many residential customers off roughly, Kathleen?
22,430. We increased about 700 households when we annexed. At this point, we have about 600 small businesses that we are charged what we call a commercial garbage collection rate. This is a business that doesn't generate enough garbage for a dumpster, but they can get away with garbage cans. We have about 600 of those. Then we have our commercial customers, and there's about 1,450 that we bill monthly.
We're still good on the rates we're charging as far
Yes.
for garbage pickup?
After the increase last year. Hopefully, we won't have another increase for several years.
And I will say, living in the annexed area, I thought I was gonna be besieged by my neighbors with a lot of complaints, and Kathleen somehow has managed, maybe it's because I live on that street, but she has managed to pick up the brush as fast as they cut it. And very good.
Since the reorganization, we have been able to work more efficiently. Any other questions?
I would say also in Kathleen's efforts, she has gone along and verified, we get a what, $10,000 a month credit from Waste Management for
For commercial and roll-off.
temps that are out there, temporary trailers, and we thought we might be taking advantage of there over the years, but you've gone out and verified.
We have done a physical audit, and we're really not that much off that $10,000 credit we're receiving. So I feel good about that. There was a time when I felt like that wasn't a good number, but it is.
Well, I know the complaints in my district have greatly decreased.
Thank
And so you're doing something right, yeah, something different.
Something different.
From last year.
What do you have in capital, Kathleen?
About 200
Health and
and
sanitation.
220, about $226,000. I'm purchasing the two CNG vehicles, which I've discussed. One new leaf machine. We had a leaf machine that we inherited that we're not using because it was going to cost too much money to fix it. So I'm going to purchase a new leaf machine, hopefully, and then a new zero-turn mower. We, on a regular basis, mow 330 properties that the city has inherited over the years. Plus, when the building department has complaints on properties that are not being maintained, Tom passes them to me. We get them mowed, keep up with the cost, and then we attach a lien on the property for the mowing.
Kathleen, just so we're clear, the two vehicles that you are purchasing, you're not purchasing them because they're CNG, purchasing because the department needs them, right?
Yes.
Okay, and they happen to be CNG because
Right.
you're interested in, making a change possibly too?
Exactly.
Okay.
And they're very visible. They're
Right.
visible.
And that's what we want as well.
Anything else?
Okay, any other questions for Kathleen, Health and Sanitation, or
She also has animal
Animal
control.
control?
Animal control. Which we, by the way, don't deal with peacocks, which we got calls
Yeah.
yesterday,
It's his district, right?
That is?
the Atlanta area. But I told the press when they called that I've never gotten a call about, peacocks running loose, but we did yesterday.
I think they were peeping in windows, weren't they? Wasn't that the problem?
They were stomping on people's gardens.
Rooftops?
And rooftops.
Right. They make a very loud noise too.
I think they're still out there at large.
Suspect.
Okay, any other questions for Kathleen?
Thank you.
If not, thank you, Kathleen.
We get a fox, I guess, or something.
Okay.
Mayor, I guess the question is, do they want to talk to anyone else that's on the public works list here? Most of them, if you look over the percentage increases, well, in total is minus .17.
Yeah. I think we've gotten most of those. Y'all want to go over to the public buildings and just go down, let's say we've already heard from Parks and Recreation earlier. Go with public buildings and kind of look down the line. If you have any questions, then I think all of our management people are here. Sure, they'll be more than happy to come up and talk to you about their particular building. Let me indicate this as far as Omen Arena, you'll see reduction of 24.80%. That's basically one full-time staff member. Our plans are, at least for this next year, this fiscal year, is to keep the arena open and trying to hopefully cut our losses. and hopefully be able to pick up some additional events in the building, which would more offset our losses. There is some built-in revenue for the arena, which and the biggest factor, our decision to try it one more year, was the use of the arena by Madison Academic. They would have absolutely no place for the physical education, their basketball games, Lane College, even though they did some renovation, I think, inside their gymnasium. Still, their flooring will not qualify in their particular conference to have basketball games, so they'll still continue to have the basketball games at Oman Arena, which is, they pay $1,000 per game. The school system is paying roughly half the utilities. And then we've got a couple of fairly large events over there. So right now we have cut back on a full-time staff member, dropped back to a part-time staff member, which basically will be zeroing in on trying to reduce our utility cost. We've talked to JEA, we've talked to TVA, and talked to our maintenance company that we have on contract. And there are some things that we can do, and we don't necessarily have to be there full-time to do it. Just monitor the heat, monitor the air, turn the lights off when it's not in use, and see basically what that's going to do to our utilities. We were informed by JEA that the demand, it is on a demand meter, which means that if one time during the month it happens to be 102 and you've got a concert inside, then whatever you use for that day will be the billing for the rest of the month. I don't understand it. That's just the way it is. They said that agreement, in order to vary that agreement, it was impossible to do because it's through TVA. So we've been in contact with them. So the key is that we continue to monitor those utilities very, very closely each day and see to what extent we can reduce them by the end of this fiscal year.
Mayor, I penciled in some numbers out to the side there, what we, you, Sam, and I had agreed to. Is we put in $125,000 for events, and then the $60,000, I'm talking about revenue, for the Madison School. So you got $185,000 in the revenue section and $252,000 even after we took all the efforts that you mentioned. So we're still looking at $70,000 upside down.
And at one time, it was approaching $250,000. Right. So we're still continuing to make progress, and hopefully with a few more events, and still in the process of trying to work out find us someone that would lease the building, a promoter hopefully, that would be able to do a lot with the building, and we'll see how that goes during this next year.
Mayor, would it behoove us to have a 3-year plan or something, or a 5-year plan to try to shut that thing down and get everybody advance notice that we're gonna do that so they could build something to?
I think there's a number of options that we can look at even during the interim, and that would be, number one, is I think we have no replacement for Oman Arena. There's nothing there. Obviously, the Civic Center is not going to work. We don't have a conference center big enough to have our banquet tonight. For example, the OVC, the Ohio Valley Conference, the baseball teams are in here. We're having to go to Grant Center at Union University. Thank goodness they agreed to let us use that building. We have no conference center large enough to have that type of event. I think first option is to obtain a pretty good lease on it. If not, then see if we can sell it. And number 3 is to make long-term plans to replace the arena with a business plan to go along with that. Because I could see us, just looking to try to replace Oman Arena and really not have a business plan, and it end up being quite a liability as far as funding for the city to operate another building. So I think all those things are viable ways that we can go. And a 5-year plan or 3-year plan would not be a bad idea, Councilman.
Well, the only thing I was thinking of was for the school that's dependent on that.
Understand.
So they would know far enough ahead of time.
Right.
That.
Well, that was a major factor in our determination to, you know, a lot of those kids live in the city, and we're to take care of the city. And that's what led to our decision this year to try to just do the best we could, cut our losses, and still maintain the building and keep it going.
Mayor, relative to that, would you consider appointing a committee to maybe study that? And
Be open to do that. I think we probably need, you know, a
Maybe
good
some people
mixture
from the
of
school
that.
system
If you all have any suggestions, as far as a study group, to look at it during this next year, and you don't necessarily have to meet once a month or once, you know, once every 2 months, just to come together. I would probably recommend that committee, and we may have a few dollars available to where we could employ and contract with a consulting group to walk us through some options that we have that would be able to spend the time during the day where members of council and volunteers locally would not have that time, and come back to us with some options. So we'll work on that, and I'll try to. And you all, if you have any suggestions, certainly to share with me as far as the makeup of that study group, I'll be happy to take a look at it and get it going. Civic Center is about the same. Oman is, as you see the reduction there. Fairgrounds the same. The NED's up a little bit. I think we took a part-time to a full-time. Is that right, Diane? No? Is it close?
Well, we retired a full-time, and I have a part-time that's 37 hours a week. But half of our salaries are taken from recreation and they're not anymore, so that's why the salary was, now all our salary is coming out of the net.
Coming out of the NED, okay. And you've gotten together your advisory committee that's working with you on sales of season tickets and supporting you, okay.
How often is the NED actually in use? On a percentage of time?
Diane, would you come out? Would you come out?
We have a season of 6 shows a year, and then the Children and Teen Theater has 5 shows a year. We rent the NED out to 2 schools at a week at a time, twice a year, and Theater Guild does 4 shows a year, but that's not including any that just call and ask to rent the facility.
So it's pretty actively used?
Yes, sir, and we're
as
trying to
opposed to
keep it
on the arena.
as much as we can that way.
Okay. Any other questions on the NED while Diane is here? If not, thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Coming on down, the rest of them are pretty much zeroed out the same as last year. You come to Riverside Cemetery, which is owned and maintained by the city. I assume that was an increase in.
As of yesterday, we don't have anybody to do it. We're bidding out, it's back July 1st, but we're going to have to take care of it. We went, Charlie and I have been in there 3 times this spring, and the man was cut.
So we fired a contractor. Okay.
He submitted his resignation.
Okay.
Doing anything yesterday, and we're rebidding it, and we may have to come back and amend that budget later.
Okay, all right, very good. Pringles, Depot, all of those, with the exception of Pringles Park, I think, which Al has gone over with you. Liberty Gardens, reduction there. Golf courses is the reduction there. So if there's any question of council on any of our public buildings and our venues, feel free to ask them and we'll call the people up.
Refresh my memory on Pringles Park. You mentioned earlier, Al, the increase of 155,000.
On Pringles Park, basically, what we're seeing is a park that's in its 16th or 17th season.
Just increase in maintenance on the park because it's getting older?
Yes. Now, we did have to put in $54,000 worth of new lighting per the Southern League, but that was a capital item. But just to make everybody aware, and the mayor and I are talking about this, The average life of a baseball field, according to the Southern League, and I don't know beans about it, but is 10 years, and this is our 16th season. Last year, they had to cancel at least 2 or 3 games when the sun was out, and it was on a weekend, and it should have been big money nights for them, but center field hadn't drained from, raining 2 or 3 days before. So we're eventually gonna have to look at, because right now we're doing so much in groundskeeping and other things that you see in expense, but someday we're gonna have to look at replacing that field. Is that not correct, Mayor?
Yeah, replacing, obviously, that, that entails the field drainage. There is a drainage system underneath the sod, fairly extravagant one. It's stopped up pipes of, obviously, after 16 years, things are gonna happen to it. We've dug it up, cleared some of them out, and then really replacing the sod, coming back in with the sand and the mixture to resod the field. So we're going to be looking at that probably sooner than later.
About the contractual services increase to 70,000, is that part of the maintenance? We contract some of that out?
That's part of the maintenance. Sometimes I charge, well, for example, the air conditioning contract we have with SM Lawrence, I charge that there rather than to repair and maintenance.
Okay.
One of the biggest items this year was the whole outfield wall almost collapsed from rot. If you start over in left center field all the way over to the scoreboard, video board in right center, basically we had to prop that up and replace panel after panel. I mean, there's evidently no paint that can really withstand, the wear and tear after 15 or 16 seasons, and the wood had just rotted. And we spent thousands and thousands of dollars there. We spent thousands of dollars in the clubhouse, which hopefully won't reoccur. Tom Winbush and his staff actually got up in there and did the insulation work, and because it was costing us an arm and a leg in utility expense on cooling that clubhouse. So it's just a very expensive facility to take care of after, it's just like Oman Arena after X number of years.
I don't think Pringles Park is in bad a shape as Omen Arena.
No.
At least it didn't look that bad.
Maybe that's not a good comparison.
But also you can go to the respect of the quality of life and the atmosphere when you come to public buildings. I think we're hurting ourselves when we defray one other building from a building. When you're talking about neighborhoods, we have to be careful with that, because we want to bring the atmosphere of the neighborhoods and the surrounding areas to a positive manner.
It's a very good point. Sometimes we're between a rock and a hard place. We actually had 98,000 people go through the turnstiles at the park. And minor league ball is not, well, it's quality ball because some of them move up to the majors.
Right.
But 50% of the people that walk out of the park after the experience couldn't tell you who won.
Right.
I mean, it's popcorn and cotton candy and
Right.
fireworks and
Midget races.
midget races and et cetera. So, when that decision was made to build the park and go into AA ball, a commitment was made for a large number of years. And when I first came on board, Charlie Farmer had me talk to the Texas League, which is, if you look at AAA ball, which is in Memphis, AA ball here, single A ball, which is mainly in like Pennsylvania, Iowa, et cetera, and single A ball teams could not afford the travel expense to play here. So when the Lozanaks were looking at selling the team, Mayor Farmer had me contact the Texas League, which plays right on the border down Amarillo and et cetera. And that actual level of baseball isn't much better, and I'm not saying this in the right way, than Union University's ball team, or Jackson State's. And their offer was to play 36 games a year, and we would have been in the hole even further as far as upkeeping the park, but only getting 36 games and versus 70-some home games now. So, you know, if anybody's got any better ideas than the mayor and I, the problem is that we've made a commitment, and we're either going to be behind the team and support it and provide entertainment for some 90,000 fans, or we're going to get out, and I don't know what we would do with the park, because the owners of the park and the current management, I will say, have done a heck of a good job with utilizing it for other events like Relay for Life. And Ernest, they've done things with your group.
We were out there Sunday.
And, you know, they're trying to reach out to charitable nonprofits, and because we don't really care how much they pay to get in, people will tend to spend a little on concessions, and just to give entertainment to kids who would otherwise be going to see something at the local theater that, in my opinion, isn't worth them seeing.
Okay, did we miss anybody, Al, in the budget presentations?
Well, we come down to basically the Sportsplex.
Okay.
If Ricky is here.
Ricky, come on up.
And I don't know, Karen, what page the Sportsplex is on.
It's gonna be the first page after the dividers of access.
Let me just give you, and of course, it was in the last year's audit. And Mike Hewitt may have touched on it, but last year's operating results was $343,444 to the good. And that includes everything. Sometimes I've been criticized for showing the hospital's donation of $200,000, there it is. But if you want to come up and look at strict operating income, it was $335. Cash flow, because we use due to and due froms, this is not exactly the best cash flow statement, but it does show a positive $500. But there's a lot of questionable items in here. I've asked him to try and come up with a different type statement that would show cash flow. We only do cash flow statements for enterprise funds. We don't do it for the general fund. And then just to give you an idea of where the Sportsplex has come from, and I believe, Ricky, the number is over the first 6 seasons, we've had 850,000 people, is that not correct?
Very close to that.
Come through the gates. And what I'm trying to track here, we started out, if I can zoom in right, with a debt of $9,056,797. You see it up in the corner. We're now, I think, miraculously down to $5,217,000. $6 million of that $9 million was 12-year capital outlay notes with Bancorp South, and we're actually a year ahead on payments there. And then we will have some debt, still $2 million left, and this may sound crazy, but we want to keep debt on the books because by state legislation, we're allowed to recover the sales tax on products sold within the park as long as we have debt.
Up to 30 years.
Up to 30 years, right. So, you know, we might even come down to some point way past my tenure and only owe $50,000, but we'd pay it off very slow. So we could continue to recover the sales tax there. The figures actually, that Tom Hansen and his group put together, Kyle Spurgeon, when this idea was first put forth, have come to fruition. If you look at the hotel motel tax, you see we started out, first year was in '08, and we had 310,000. That's now grown up to 475,000. But that will be over after 10 years, and then the money starts going back to the CEDC and the county and the city accordingly. But it has really been a successful way of financing. What has really grown is the state shared taxes, part of which is the sales tax I was just talking about, and part of which is the sales tax that we get off of the 60-acre Gary Taylor investment. You know, we bought 60 acres and built a sportsplex. He bought 60 acres, and it's Park Place Development, I believe. Right. And that's where the Sonic and the McDonald's and the, what's the name of the grocery store? Food Giant and all that is. Holiday Inn Express. And you can see we've grown up to where we're now getting $593,000 a year combined off of what we earn sold through the park and what's sold in that 60-acre development.
Excuse me, Al, does that include the movie theater on the other side of the highway?
No.
It does not?
No, that was an afterthought to the, you know, that's not Gary Taylor's development. Right. And then what we do get from West Tennessee Healthcare, and it's a donation, the county gets the same amount every year. It's a minimum of $200,000 up to a maximum of $1 million based upon their return on investment. And we're getting roughly $200,000. That money, by the resolution from the hospital itself to both the city and the county, could not be used on operations. It's restricted to capital or debt. And that's how we have used it. So what you're seeing now is, if you look at the last 2 years there, look at FY11, the restricted, of the debt is $753,000 that we had to pay, and we got $1,029,000 in restricted funds, same way in FY12. So the lines have crossed if you were looking at a graph, and we're now starting to get in more restricted revenues than where they have to actually go. And this is what I've asked Mike Hewitt also to look at, because the committee that Ricky and I have to report to, which is the Oversight Committee made up of appointees, 3 each from the city and county, by the city and county mayors. Basically, that looks like we should be paying back general fund debt that we just turned around and borrowed, the $250,000. So we've got some questions to answer there as to where those revenues were applied. But it's a good story to tell that we are now taking in more money on restricted areas. Of course, some of that's going to disappear in 10 years versus the application of those funds. Go ahead, Ricky.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor.
Afternoon.
Just want to share with you just a few things. Don't get to during the year, so when I do get my time, I like to share some facts from last year. Most of you received that from the overall city reports, but I did want to highlight just 3 or 4 of those. We did have 1,545 travel teams, more than 170 local Dixie Youth and JRPD softball, adult softball teams, and also our coach pitch and T-ball from the JRPD is housed at our place now also. Sportsplex hosted 2 collegiate tournaments, softball championship tournaments last year, and this year the Trans-South played their final collegiate softball tournament at the Sportsplex. Sportsplex developed sponsorships, of which we were very, very happy, partnerships with 15 different hotels this past year. That is the highest that we've ever done. That is a hotel saying, we know that we're going to have people stay in our hotels because they're coming in to play ball, but they still want to support financially the Sportsplex in sponsoring a tournament or some other type of sponsorships packages that we have. Sportsplex donated more than 3,500 items of food to the Rifle Community Food Pantry in 2012. A couple other things, the Sportsplex hosted both, or the USGF World Series tournaments for the third consecutive season. We're expecting about a 20% increase in that particular tournament. Last year, we had 64 teams from about 8 states to play in that week-long World Series there. The Sportsplex debuted a new playground in Complex A in 2012, and it's getting its wear and tear, I promise you, and that's been a very great added addition to the Sportsplex. I guess one of the proudest things that I can say to you also is the Sportsplex provided seasonal employment for more than 225 people. Just a couple of other comments and then any questions that you might have. Most of you I've seen in and out around the city. Mentioned a little bit about the rain that we've had the last 3 weekends. We have had to cancel all 3 of those tournaments. That is significant for us. We have been a little bit active now in looking toward adding an additional tournament at the end of June that we didn't have, and we think that will be helpful at that point. Give you an idea of what's coming up next. This past weekend, we had 116 teams. That is a new record for the Sportsplex. There was 116 teams from 7 states here. For the next 3 weeks, which will be a month, and this is why we're trying to hopefully be able to make up some of those rainouts. This coming weekend, we have 91 teams coming to the Sportsplex. Next weekend, the Memorial Day weekend, we have 119, so we're probably going to break our record from 2 weeks ago. And then finally, in the first weekend in June, we have 90 teams coming at this point. Some of those will be added, a few more teams at that point. So with that, if there are any questions about the budget?
I have one. Does the Gillum League still participate out there?
The invitation's been there, Councilman, every year. I talked to Terry Smith at the first of the year, and the door is completely open.
They've not taken us up on that?
Have not. I think, as Terry and I have talked, it's logistical. Transportation would be a major factor at that point.
Okay.
But that continues to stay open each and every year that we will, as long as I'm there, we will have that continue to be open.
I think we can figure that out. And I'd like to work with you on that. Okay?
Great.
All right.
Great.
One question I had on the budget numbers you had, you've got a COLA figure of 24,000. Is that just increase in salaries?
All right, Lynette's behind me, so, Councilman.
Yes, sir, I did across the board with both full-time and the part-time, and that includes the COLA and the $600.
Okay. Why did you not just include that in salaries figure then instead of showing
They
it?
specifically asked us to break COLA out.
I guess that answers the why. And then the regular salaries are gonna be up. Y'all hired more people?
As the volume of the teams increase, we have to increase staff.
And they have, Councilman, gone up every year, so, and we will fluctuate with those hirings, but that's basically what we try to do each year is to add it up like that at that point.
And your capital expense is just included in your regular expenses there?
Yes. It's listed there. It's 202,000.
Okay. What are y'all gonna do with that this year?
We're going to, let me just share with you those areas. We're going to be irrigating the commons areas in the 4 pods that are out there. That is a major part of that. It's 120,000. We have to haul hoses. Now, every field has irrigation, automatic irrigation. But the commons areas, and if you've ever driven by there, there's some large commons areas. We did that on purpose where teams could stay, put up their tents, stay right in the area so they could stay at the park. And so we're going to hopefully irrigate the entire Sportsplex area, which is $120,000 of that. The other things, lighting improvements, buying an additional fryer for one of our concessions areas, batting cages, and then there's some miscellaneous money there. But the majority will be for the irrigations of the commons areas. And that will save us a ton of money on hoses that are wearing out, folks actually, personnel having to move those, and when you put that out there, they've got to be constantly moved so they don't just have water in one place. So it's really going to help us long run.
Ricky, on a typical rain out of an entire tournament, what, in dollars, what does that cost you all? I'm talking about revenue over expenses on an average.
We looked at, and this is including expenses, help me, Lynette, with that, the 3 rainouts are about $154,000. That is net.
That's the revenue side.
That's the revenue side.
That's the revenue side.
Okay. 154,000 with the 3 rainouts that we've had. Now again, if you look at our 7-year track record, it's pretty good. We'll have one, sometimes parts of 3 or 4, like a Friday night where we can make up the games and the people stay later in the parks during the weekend. But this is our first time ever for 3 full weekends. And the questions have come up again, because of the tarps and those kind of things, but personnel-wise, there's just no way to handle that. South Haven Park's been here 16, 17 years, and they have the same number of fields we have, and they do not have they do not have tarps at that point.
Okay, any other questions, Ricky, on the sportsplex? If not, thanks.
Thank you.
I think, Mayor, that's basically, other than the drug funds, which are pretty well self-explanatory, they take care of themselves on their own. And if you look on page 10 of the ordinance, the Community Redevelopment Fund, the CRA, basically that's just money that flows. We go ahead and make payments on that $3.2 million loan, and then it's refunded to us through CDBG, Dave Ralston, so it's a zero effect, basically. And then the Community Development Fund, that's really what Dave Ralston presented, I think it was at the last council meeting. It's sort of above my head when you get into all the HUD requirements and things, but it really has little effect on us. It's just under our umbrella.
Okay. Probably need to address at this point the committee recommendation on our nonprofits. Chair of that committee is not here right now, so any other parts of the budget, Al, that we can get while Councilman Brooks is out, or have we finished with it?
We're basically finished with it. I don't know, I believe Sam gave me this as the final decisions of the group. Oops. Am I on, Sam?
I can kind of wing it.
Yeah, the 720 is 326,000, which is grants and donations, and then the appropriation to other agencies is 178,000. And these are the decisions of the, what was it, Randy, a 3-person group committee?
I'll go ahead and cover it. Well, if he shows up, we'll let him take over. But 3 of us, I think Pepper, myself, and Councilman Brooks were the 3 that met. We met several times, and basically what we did is we took the budgeted amounts from the prior year and reduced that total amount by about 10%. And then with that 10%, we reduced it by, we allocated some funds to a few other agencies, but not the full 10% amount. So I believe we actually ended up budgeting a little bit less for both of these line items that were in the prior year. And then there were a couple of agencies that could not, or we felt shouldn't be cut by the 10%, so we didn't. And this is the numbers we ended up with grants and donations and appropriations to other agencies that we're recommending, that I believe those are the actual amounts you put in the budget, we recommended for the budget amount.
Yes.
So you all asked me to put those in even though they weren't approved at that time?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're asking to be approved at this meeting, that's correct. And that was our recommendation coming from that committee.
Randy, do you remember which two you decided shouldn't be cut?
Uh,
I can't see it.
It was, help me out there,
Chamber
Steve.
of Commerce, $75,000 that we committed to give them for 5 years.
That's correct.
And the other one was Madison Canyon, which was one-fourth of the salary of the lady who does our Madison Achieve Camp.
That's correct. And then also on the State Department that does the ditch repairs,
Right, we're basically already asked for 45,000, we did cut them 10%, so they're getting 40,500.
okay.
Thank you.
It's still a significant increase. They've done a lot of work, they did a lot of work in your area down.
They sure do.
Yeah, we felt like we get more money out of them than
Yeah.
we give them, so.
Why are we cutting 10% and adding 8 more?
Councilman Brooks, there he is.
I apologize, I had to step out and take care of some business.
Why are we cutting 10% from nonprofit and we're adding 8 more?
Well, when we looked at it, and Sam kind of helped us with this as well, we kind of agreed to a 10% across the board cut, and that left us with $61,000. Additionally, we were funding,
Can you push that page up a
we
little
were
bit?
funding Madison Haywood Developmental Center
This page,
Just push it up a
It's
little.
30,000,
at a different rate than the county,
right.
and,
That'd be 30,000 we'd be getting back there.
okay.
Why do
And-
we have to cut anybody and just go ahead and add them if you want to? There, well, that's $29,000.
Well, that's one way to do it, but we thought that as well, that the city is in a position to fund some of these agencies. These are some agencies that are doing some work that the city is not doing, or can't do, or doesn't do. And that this was an opportunity to do that. Now, at the end of the day, we still saved the city some money. If you look at the line item, I believe the difference is $225,000 relative to about 170-something thousand for this year's budget.
Then I see, next year you're gonna come back and you're gonna recommend cutting 20%, right?
That'll be up to the committee. We discussed that. We also discussed, Councilman, what is the city's position relative to funding nonprofits in general? There are some who think that we shouldn't be in the business of funding nonprofits, and there are others who have a different position. But as a nonprofit review committee, we would be making a recommendation, and that was part of the discussion that we had.
Okay.
Councilman Brooks, do we have copies of this page here, or?
No, we don't have this.
No, I don't even have that.
Okay.
Al had that.
I can distribute that to you.
Right.
Sam gave me
Yeah,
this.
what I distributed was the minutes from our meeting.
Look at, because he's got to move up and down for CL.
Right, what I distributed was the minutes from our meeting.
From the Imagination Library down to undesignated funds, that's all new funding that the
Okay.
that the council approved.
Right, and additionally, Councilman, there are some agencies that we did not fund because they are funded through the grants program through the city. For instance, RIFA, and that's the one that comes to mind, that did come to us for funding that we did not fund. So there was a list of, I'm gonna say, 6 or 7 of those that we didn't fund because we were funding them through the grants program.
But you're recommending cutting 10% from the chamber and the COLA.
Yeah.
Not the chamber. Not the chamber.
Not the chamber.
Not the chamber. What about Jacola?
All of those, yeah, it was 10% across the board.
Sam's getting us a copy of it.
Yeah, they're getting a copy of that, and I think that'll give us a better idea. I apologize for not having that available. What I did have available was the minutes from those meetings. And really one of the largest discrepancies that we discovered was the amount we were funding above the county relative to Madison Haywood. And
That would give us $30,000.
that gave us $30,000 back. And we just felt that we could
So
use
we
some of
could
that.
go ahead and keep the 20 we got and add these that you all want to and still come out.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's what we did.
Okay, that what?
Yeah, that's what we did.
You're not recommending 10% cut, what you're doing?
No, we are recommending 10% cut. Actually, that was kind of the compromise, for lack of a better word, that we were able to strike to fund some of these other agencies.
Well, you're getting 30,000 back from Madison Haywood that we're not gonna do. Right. Okay, so then we could go ahead and fund the agencies, which I have no problem with at all.
So what you're saying, Councilman, if I understand, is you want to fund the present agencies at the present level.
Right.
And then to fund the new ones.
With the 30,000.
With the 30,000 we're gonna get.
Correct.
Okay. I'm sure we'd entertain a motion if you would.
David, we were trying, our committee was trying to save the city some money by not funding these these that were nonprofit. And we were trying, and our charge was to save the city some money. And at the same time, try to be fair to all these different people. Right. And that's what we did. That's what we did. I don't know, did you get a copy of that last sheet, David, or did you?
They're passing it out now, but we didn't stop right here with Mr. Buchanan.
I will keep them
He's
all.
gonna keep them all. Right. But by the same token, I thought that our charge, or felt that part of our charge was to be open and transparent and to give some of these other new nonprofits the opportunity to present their case and to come before the council to be funded. In the past, we've just, like you suggest, David, is to just surreptitiously fund the same folks that we've been funding for years. And, the process seems closed and seems to play favorites. So I felt that we shouldn't do that and to give anybody an opportunity. Now, they may or may not be funded, but at least they had the opportunity to be heard, had the opportunity to submit their financial information just like any other nonprofit, and we were able to vet them just like everyone else.
Well, this Toccoa and Apple Manor, for example, that is two valuable assets we have here in Jackson.
Yeah, I mean.
I run a jail.
Right,
I know what
I know.
comes in there.
Right.
And so, you start cutting funding, and they're gonna
Sure.
start cutting people in there, and that would be a disservice to this city.
And I'm surely sensitive to that, and I'm sure that
Star
arguments will
Center.
be made for, any other nonprofit, But, of course, decisions have to be made.
I hear you.
Councilman, if you want to pull those different agencies out of that 10% cut, I'm sure we could contemplate that as
I
well.
don't see pulling it out when you're taking 30,000 away from Madison Hayward development, and that's what that costs for those development. I don't see that, well, that's a problem. These are, I would say, beneficial places that we would be taking care of here and helping. I'm not saying we need to take them out.
Okay, I understand.
So-
I just don't see cutting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, so
Is there a
basically
motion
what,
on the floor?
no, there hadn't been a motion.
Hadn't
Not
been
a motion.
I have two quick questions.
I have a question first.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically what you're saying, Councilman Cisco, that the 30,000 that they pull is just about equal to the 29,000 to new additions that they add in monies, right?
Right.
Okay. So it's just $1,000 different.
That's right.
He's saying to keep it that way.
So you want to keep the present ones at the present funding,
Correct.
level of funding, and you want to add these
Right.
because of the $30,000
We're getting
saving from
that- we're
Madison
saving
Haywood.
there, right.
Okay. I'm finished, Mr. Conley.
Okay. What is CMAC? I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Can
Is
somebody
it-
help
is it
me
the
out?
list of, I was in the
On
minutes.
this one? On the minutes?
I don't know, it's on the list we just got.
It's right under Youth Town.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Sam, do you know what CMAC is?
Sam, help us out.
Is that the gentleman that does the pottery?
CMAC for $1,000? That was, yeah, I forget the acronym.
29.
Yeah, that-
I don't know, CMAC, undesignated funds, is that just something we're holding out in case someone comes with a request throughout the year?
I think Karen will have to
Yeah.
speak to that. The undesignated funds,
Actually, Mr. Moulton handles that account.
okay.
Okay.
What that is, Ernest, is that's the mayor's discretionary fund. In other
Okay.
words, there will be things that come up through the years.
Yeah,
Disasters
sure,
happen.
tickets and all that stuff
Yes.
that the mayor's office
I just
purchases.
want to make sure it's clear on it.
I apologize for not
So we have,
remembering that CMAC.
I think Sam's got it right here.
Yeah, he does.
Well, I do remember the purpose of the committee, and why we formed it, and remember, we were having so many people come to us and asking, you know, that we fund certain things, and we just felt that we needed to rein that in and have control over it somewhat. But I know what you're saying, Councilman Cisco. You're in there fighting, I know, you know, since, and this would work out what you're saying. But
Right.
that's why the committee was formed, and I appreciate them, because that's a difficult job. And they're trying to do what we asked them to do, which was rein in some of this, but be fair and make room for some of these that are coming forward for the first time and asking for funds.
Well, they're doing that when you cut $30,000.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, yeah, I know.
so we're talking about $1,000 difference.
Right.
29,000 and 30,000.
Convenient Patient Advocate Organization.
Right.
That's what. It's
All
for,
right.
CMAC is for patient
Right.
advocates, what it's for.
Okay.
Right. So, would you entertain a motion?
I make a motion that we keep the present nonprofits as is from last year and add these 8 others on at 29,000, and that we deduct the 30,000, $30,000 from Madison Haywood, which is, and I make a motion that we entertain this.
Okay, does council understand that,
We're gonna go back
that
to the
motion?
original formula last year, funded the last funds, and then use the 30,000 from Madison Haywood to fund the new nonprofit.
Yeah, that's what he said.
I second.
Okay, council members understand the motion?
Yes.
And the change in the funding. Staff making notes of the potential change in that number, okay?
Yes, Karen is
Okay.
keeping a log,
Okay.
yes.
I understand the motion again.
But we're not gonna do the overall 10% reduction. Gonna take the,
Put everything back in and where I took the 10% out.
right.
Yeah,
take
put everything-
30,000 from
mhm.
Madison Haywood and
Fund the new ones.
Was there 8 new ones? I guess that was my
I don't think it
question.
was
I think
8.
we had 8 new ones.
Yeah, it was
Which is, was really
I guess
at
it
a
is.
reduction of only $1,000 difference.
Right,
It's from the, yeah,
Right, it
there
is
was
8.
8 more new ones.
right. That's correct.
Ms. Bell, those numbers add up for you? Okay, good.
It'll be on their change sheet that we present on June.
Okay,
Okay.
good deal. Okay, any other, we have a motion to second, any other discussion with council? Okay, council, please vote.
Get on it.
That's it.
Oh, did you want to vote no?
Exactly.
That's it? That's,
It was the right.
Yeah, he gave it. Yeah,
And that
he
motion
tried.
passed with 6 in favor and 2
Okay, now I
Now, I
suppose.
think we're down to the point, Mayor, where we need to consider the ordinance itself.
well,
See if there's any changes.
well, depends how you look at it. We got the 8 but
Okay, council has heard the
they can reduce it.
department heads and heard the evaluation of Al on the budget. And I know you all been making some notes, so if there's any changes, and since we have not accepted a motion yet, I think it'd probably be in order now to discuss those potential changes in the budget, not call them amendments, but just changes in the budget which you'd like to propose to your fellow council persons.
Yes, Mayor, the only thing I discussed with Al earlier, I think mentioned to a couple of the council persons, the possibility of allocating a small percentage of our property tax to a capital outlay fund, kind of get on the road to start allocating some of that to capital outlay. And I'd like to broach the possibility of maybe putting 2% in. That would be about $500,000 of the overage that we've got now, and still leave us about $250,000 or so for you know, if we got anything crops up during the year that we need money for.
Where are you gonna take that money from, Councilman?
In a capital outlay fund, so at some point in time, maybe we won't have to borrow money for capital outlay, but we'll have capital outlay funds.
What if we have an emergency and we take that money and put it somewhere else?
Do what?
What if we've had an emergency, like a tornado, or flood, or whatever,
Well, if
and
we
we've
have a-
taken that money out of there and put it somewhere else, what happens?
If we have an emergency or a flood, I mean, we've always got the option of taking it out of capital outlay fund and put it back in the other fund. But there's no guarantee that $700,000, and we've got fund balance of $22 million that we can tap into for emergencies also. I just kind of feel that we need, at some point in time, we need to start allocating a portion of our property taxes for capital outlay funds, so that we'll have, you know, funds to be able to do that if we need it.
Councilman,
We would have to borrow money every year.
excuse me, Councilman, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but would you consider, or is there a possibility to table that so we could get a bit more information on that?
Sure. I just was, it's food for thought.
Okay.
Just, you know,
I
talk
didn't
a
know
little
if
bit
you
about
want to
it.
present that today. I would just like to
I don't
get a bit
necessarily
more
want to do it
information on
today, but we
that.
might want to think about it and
We could always do it by a budget amendment after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We will be looking for some information from you then.
Councilman, you had mentioned something about the school resource officers also, in my notes. Now, you may have reconsidered that.
I'm just opposed to it, but I'm not gonna, I'll be outvoted on that. I hate to see the city paying expenses that are actually county expenses. City taxpayers already pay county taxes, because if you live in the city, you live in the county. We're kind of being triple dipped there, I feel like, on some of the county items there, but I don't have a problem with school resource officers at all, so.
Well, I think I know where you're coming from. After this year, we've looked back on our budget on a number of occasions, and I've asked Al on a different number of occasions to give me some numbers, and I verified the numbers with the finance department of Madison County, and all the local dollars that's spent, local dollars, not talking about federal funding, state funding, all the local dollars that are spent, the city is spending about 70% of the total budget of the education department.
Well, you see, they definitely go 20% next year. Doesn't look like it.
Okay, any other changes or?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I've talked to some of the council members about replacing our laptop computers to probably going to iPads. Been talking to Ms. Bell about the cost of it. I think over the years, I think our whole city will be looking at going paperless. I think all over the country, a lot of people have updated and going for better tools to use amongst the council members. I mean, we can bring it, instead of having all this paper that we're using every day, monthly, it will be a cost. Over the years, I think, the next couple of years, will wash out from what we're using now. So we can take a look at getting iPads. I think I talked to the mayor about the computers will go back into the system, still be able to be used, laptop computers that we're using now.
Ms. Bell, will that, you want to come up second?
And Councilman, is that?
While Ms. Bell coming up, Councilman Dodd, my laptop is at home. I don't bring it here. We can bring them. I understand what you're saying. We bring pod here, leave the laptop at home.
You saying keep both?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd, does that include cell phones as well? Are you broaching that subject or only the iPad?
Well, I think, so I've talked to some of the council members, they saying, the iPad, either one of the two, so I mean, what we can
You
look
would have
at
a
and kinda
choice?
see, yeah. Because I think someone already got phones that probably can use, but I think we can kind of look at it and see what's best
Okay.
per council member.
So part of the discussion is for the council on their laptop, is simply to turn it in and distribute it between the city departments, go to an iPad. Are we talking about the same type of technology coming off of one, going to another, Ms. Bell, or is
Well,
it
the
a
iPad
different?
is much more advanced than a laptop, I
I
mean, as
understand.
far as
I
that.
understand.
There are some recurring operational costs, which I have provided to Mr. Dodd, because you do have to have a connection fee monthly, which I've provided him all of those costs over the last few months he's requested on that. The IT staff has researched the cost of the purchase as well as recurring fees, so.
Okay, how about the reoccurring fees for the laptop? Any reoccurring monthly, anything
Well,
on?
currently, the IT department says it's $20 per computer device, and that's to cover all upgrades and everything. So the council does have a $20 per month on each of their laptops that is in the city council budget. I think it's $1,920 a year.
Okay.
Covers all.
I hate to ask this, y'all still have a fax machine? Any of you want
What,
to turn
council?
it in?
Yeah.
Hey, these younger
It can
guys
go in
have
some
one.
antiquity
Right.
museum.
But if you get out,
I'm sad, let the younger guys have it. I'm sad.
Well,
Well, I think
does it have to be a unanimous thing, or could we just, if there are council members like Councilman Dodd who prefers that, maybe he could have it, and if we're fine with a computer? Because, I don't want to cost the city extra money if everybody doesn't want it.
I don't think it's gonna cost extra money, that's why I'm saying, if you look at it, it'd be almost a washout.
Yeah,
There
well,
is.
some might just not be comfortable with it.
There'd be an
That was my
ROI
thing.
in the
Some
next
might
fiscal
not
year on
want
the
it.
lack of paper use. One point though I was thinking about after Councilman Dodd and I talked, there would be an initial nominal fee for the software and app or something to be compatible with Excel and Office and things like
Correct.
that.
Yeah, there are some initial setup fees, and then as some of you that have iPhones and stuff know, there's data plan, connection fees that would be an operational ongoing cost.
Especially with the emails that we get with
Right.
Word and Excel, we have to get that program on the iPad.
Any further discussion on?
Just real quickly, Mayor, I mean, it is a technology age, and I get my city council emails on my phone. No one calls my home. They all call my cell phone. Many people don't have a home phone. So, I mean, we are doing city business. We do need to be accessible. And I just think that, and there are some that don't do that, don't need it, don't use it, and, that's fine. But Cisco said he wants his, he wants to keep his the way it is. And I think we should have the
Yeah, you can have
opportunity,
it sit wherever you want.
if
Well,
we can, to make
Okay.
use of that.
Yeah, okay, Councilman, let's do this rather than voting. I mean, we're talking about a communications issue for the council. Why don't we, let me suggest this, is why don't we go ahead and plug into the budget, an amount of money to take care of the iPads and all the, whatever goes with them, and then let each council person make their own choice. If we have a surplus at the end of the year, so be it. We'll put it back into another area. And so if you
That sounds like
can,
a good suggestion.
is everybody okay with that?
Sounds pretty good.
Good. And we'll just go ahead and plug that number in, so on our next meeting, on our second reading, we'll have that number plugged in. And then if you would communicate with Mrs. Bell, let her know your technology needs, we can go from there. And if you want to turn your fax machine in, we'll put it in a museum somewhere.
The Bemis Museum.
But one personal note, I have to add with respect to Councilman Brooks talking about people with your cell phone number. Don't you give out your cell phone number to too many people if it's not a public number. That way you're there. Your cell phone number is your private number.
Well, you do
That's
your thing, I'll do mine.
I know, but that's your private number. That's not a city number.
Yeah, you do your thing, I'll do mine.
I'm not going to give out my cell number to anybody if it's not a City of Jackson cell phone.
Do your thing.
I know, but that's a private number. That's private.
Okay, now that we've completed that conversation, well, I think we're ready now. Are
I
we
think,
now for?
yes, we need to look at a motion, or if there, or call for the question on the ordinance itself. There will be, between now and the June 4th second reading,
That's the next move.
we will publish a list of all the changes.
Okay,
That give everybody a chance, time.
right. Right, okay.
But this is what's before us now, is we need to hear a
So
motion.
this ordinance will be as it is.
Yes.
With no amendments, and then whatever Karen plugs in, that'll be brought back for the second reading.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Move the adoption.
Okay, we have a motion for adoption of the ordinance. We have a second before we vote. This is an ordinance on first reading. I'll ask if there are any comments, either in support of or in opposition to the passage of this budget ordinance. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, and council, please vote.
You want me to do it again?
And the vote is unanimous.
No.
Okay. The second portion of that, Mayor, is the
That's right.
resolution, or the ordinance, the first reading of the ordinance on the tax rate, and there is no change. A slight change in the distribution. Last year, it was a perfect 80-20, and this year, I think it's 79 point something for the general fund, I forget my pie chart, and 20-something for the sinking fund. Very little change, fractional change. But the tax rate stays the same.
197.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Brooks and a second by
Right.
Councilman Bray, and then we will now open the floor for a public hearing. Ask if there's anyone present who'd like to be heard on this matter, either in support of or in opposition to. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, and council, please vote.
And the vote is unanimous.
We're finished. Being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
You said it. Karen.